The story begins with an uncomfortable carriage ride. Inside was the beautiful Tidy, a woman known as the White Servant, who boasted that from now on, she would live in the same palace as Empress Sepia. Worst of all, she was officially about to become the Emperor's mistress. Days earlier, maids were beautifying Empress Sepia, as it marked 5 years since she moved to the Empire of Beasts. In this empire, it's important for destined partners to get a mark on their body with the name of their true love. Sepia had waited a long time, but she didn't expect what happened next. A woman appeared out of nowhere, claiming to have the Emperor's mark on her body. That's how Tidy appeared in her life. Today, after arriving with her in the same carriage, she met with Emperor Damien, needing to speak with him in private. Sepia asked her husband if he rested well last night. And of course, how could he not? He slept with the person who bears his mark. That meant peace and tranquility. Sepia couldn't understand such audacity. She wanted to know if he already had his companion's mark. Luckily, he didn't. Because although that woman is his partner, she is nothing more than a mistress compared to her, the Empress. With that comment, the idiot Damien left, and Sepia didn't know what to do. How did he change so much? She remembered her childhood with him, resting on him while he was transformed into a beast. Back then, there was only happiness. Above all, she could trust him, as Damien always swore his mark would appear on his skin. Sepia, being human, had only just learned about the marks. It said that the name of your destined partner appears like a tattoo, and everyone who has that mark eventually falls in love with their partner. Although Sepia, being human, wouldn't get the mark, Damien would. He promised his name would appear on him. But it was all just a stupid dream. Then, the filthy rat Tidy interrupted her, with her sweet comment that apparently the Emperor hadn't stopped talking about her. But she apologized. She had to go see the Emperor. She can't be far from His Majesty because of the mark's effect. And speaking of the mark, this vial which showed it to Sepia, it didn't leave much to the imagination. To top it off, she told Sepia not to worry, because from now on, she would be the one sleeping with the Emperor. And with that, the sly fox left happily. To make matters worse, Damien had returned. Seeing Tidy, he held her with great affection, not even considering his wife's feelings. He had supposedly come back to tell the Empress something. But since the slug Tidy feigned weakness from the carriage ride, Damien simply said goodbye and took his beautiful mistress to her room. That night, Sepia remained silent. She went for a walk on the outskirts of the palace. She didn't know how to react in the darkness. The hostility of that woman, but it's not like that. She couldn't give up now, not after overcoming so many obstacles to get where she is. Suddenly, she felt cold, and like a fallen angel, she spoke with the sky. A handsome knight appeared. He gave her his cloak and apologized. He had gotten lost while walking through the palace. Sepia felt that this guy was a beast man, but on his part, he was not a beast man. His warmth made her decide to be his guide, since it was the first time they had ever met. The man introduced himself as Roxanne, and they walked together for a short time. When she showed him the exit, they said their goodbyes, but Roxanne hoped to see her again. And well, between Damien and Roxanne, I choose Roxanne 1,000 times. Look at him, he's gorgeous. The bastard is gorgeous, gorgeous. Meanwhile, Sepia returned to her room. Her maid noticed she arrived with a man's cloak. But Sepia gave no explanation and decided to go rest. While lying down, she thought about the man she had met. His black hair and golden eyes told her he was a foreigner. She didn't know when she would see him again. Days later, Damien, as always, was putting his foot in his mouth with Sepia. Today, he blamed her for pushing Tidy at her father's house during lunch and made it clear she is the most important thing he is right now. But since nothing happened to Tidy, he would let it go, but it shouldn't happen again. Sepia clarified that she wouldn't stay silent, she never pushed her, and since he has no evidence, he can't blame or interrogate her. Besides, if that's what Tidy said, then that means she wants the Emperor to contact the king. Against the Empress. Without another word, she left the table. That night, exhausted by the mistress situation, Sepia went to a small lake for some fresh air. She wondered how Damien had changed so much, but surprisingly, she ran into Roxanne there as well. Sepia didn't understand why someone who isn't a member of the imperial family could enter that place. But Roxanne was obviously doing something illegal. He claimed he had been wandering around and ended up there. But since they had met, he invited her for a walk with a friend, and the idea of having a friend appealed to Sepia. Of course, Sepia didn't want to hide her identity and was about to introduce herself when the filthy rat Tidy appeared out of nowhere. Yeah. Sepia didn't understand what that woman was doing in the Empress's courtyard. She asked her, and Tidy just said the Emperor was going to give her a property. She was seeing which one she liked, though she had just learned that all of this belongs only to the Empress. And only royalty can enter. Tidy? Playing the innocent, she apologized, but took the opportunity of finding Sepia with another man to comment that in that case, the gentleman with her must be a member of the imperial family. Roxanne then introduced himself as a friend of Her Majesty, just out for a walk. Tidy tried to join them, but Roxanne politely told her he doesn't like walking with strangers. At this, Tidy mentioned Machiavellianly, "I understand. But I didn't know Her Majesty also had a lover." But of course, she was supposedly happy. What's better than Her Majesty the Empress not being alone? And she promised to keep the secret, but does anyone believe this witch? Well, I don't. Although Sepia clarified that it's not what she thinks. He is her friend, and she just insulted him. Tidy supposedly apologized, putting on a good girl face with hostile eyes. Roxanne was fed up with this sly fox. He told her to look at her own situation. Not everyone is or has a lover. At that, Tidy ran off. Left alone with Roxanne, Sepia asked if he knew she was the Emperor's mistress. Of course, it's the main topic in town. So Sepia asked him to be careful with her. But Roxanne was happy that Her Majesty was worried about him. But since it had gotten very late, Roxanne said goodbye for the night, without giving Sepia a chance to thank him for defending her from that harpy. Days later, as Sepia walked through her palace, she overheard something very curious from some noblewomen. When she asked, she learned there was a problem with the armies that participated in the raid, or more clearly, the war. They haven't been allowed into the capital. And of course, they had arrived a month ago. This was all due to the Emperor's orders. Sepia didn't understand why they were treating the heroes so poorly, and it didn't even make sense because they were preparing a victory banquet. Just then, Mrs. Lemedy, the Empress's head maid, arrived, telling her the Emperor was waiting to meet with her. Going to see him, she already knew what it could be about. Tidy surely went and tattled about Roxanne. And of course, that's exactly what happened. Damien started interrogating her about the man, and Sepia clarified that he's just a friend. But for Damien, a friendship between a man and a woman doesn't exist. Setting that aside, Sepia wanted to discuss something that was actually important, the entry of the armed forces into the capital. Damien didn't want to discuss it with her, but Sepia made it clear. She is the Empress, mother of the Empire, and today she was going to make him understand the consequences of his attitude. First, he'll have more problems with Duke Leopold. Besides, they had sacrificed so much for the Empire. It wasn't good to make enemies. At that, Damien acted like the beast he is. He shut her up abruptly and emanated an uncontrollable fury. Regretting his actions, he told Sepia, "Do whatever you want." Because of that, Sepia quickly sent Mrs. Lemedy to send a message to the capital's gate to allow the soldiers to enter and, of course, to grant them lodging and food. Though she soon began to wonder, if they hadn't entered yet, how was Roxanne in the capital? Meanwhile, outside the capital, all the soldiers were exhausted and wanted to rest properly. Just then, one of them reported that the gates were open. Everyone could now enter. For a moment, they thought the Emperor had changed his mind. But then Roxanne, the captain of the army, clarified to everyone that this wasn't the emperor's doing, but the empress's orders. She's the only one with common sense in the empire. And so, everyone cheerfully entered the capital. A few days later, the grand victory banquet was held. As always, the emperor entered with the empress. To everyone, they both had grace and elegance, though there was clearly no love. The mistress even had a seat on the throne. Soon the banquet began, and the heroes were announced. Along with them, Roxanne entered as Duke Claude Leopold. Everyone admired such beauty. He drew even more attention when Roxanne approached the throne to greet them. Damien welcomed him, and Roxanne thanked them. He planned to continue working for the empire. He intended to search for more magic stone mines from now on, as in the lands of the conquered barbarians, countless mines had been found. He also thanked them for their hard work and hoped he would ask for anything as a reward. Roxanne took advantage of this and asked for the Empress to grant him her blessing. More than an empress, Sepia is the famous star of Ishtar, a saint in the empire. Considered the maiden who will guide her future husband on the path of glory for the empire of beasts. Clearly, that's why the beast Damien married her. And being recognized as a saint, she stood to grant her blessing to Duke Claude Leopold, better known as Roxanne, wishing that in the future, loneliness would stay away from him. After that, the ball began, and as is tradition, Sepia had no choice but to dance with her horrible husband. He soon started bothering her, asking if her lover was at the banquet. "You bastard!" Damien, laughing, told her he didn't really care, as long as it wasn't serious. But there was one thing she was forbidden to do: get close to Duke Leopold. When Sepia clarified that he couldn't decide that, Damien got angry, and just then, Leopold appeared. The filthy rat Tidy interrupted them, making Damien focus on the war. Only on her. Still, the banquet continued perfectly, until the crazy Tidy put her foot in her mouth. She was talking with nobles at the banquet, who wondered why they hadn't seen her among the nobility before. Supposedly, it was because she hadn't been in good health. But those who knew her knew that Tidy was adopted by a low-ranking noble couple as an adult, and that's what the conversation focused on. The beauty of the emperor and the duke, with the duke being considered more handsome. Then Tidy's supposed mother mentioned that the emperor only allowed the armed forces to enter thanks to her daughter Tidy. Ever since Tidy, a white servant, was marked with the emperor's name, he listens to her a lot. Tidy even mentioned that she only wanted to look out for the hero's bravery, but she didn't know something. The fool didn't know it wasn't the emperor who ordered their entry, but the empress. Sepia didn't know whether to correct the rumor right now until the vice commander suddenly mentioned it wasn't true. They entered the capital, thanks to the empress. And even Roxanne confirmed it. They even added that it was the empress herself who had given them lodging and food. With that, everyone praised the empress so much. And they left Tidy aside too. Soon accused her of being a complete liar. Tidy justified herself by saying she had spoken with the emperor, but she didn't know their entry was because of the empress, not her. But the vice commander mentioned that a mistress has no right to have an opinion on the empire, so it made no sense for the emperor to listen to her. And well, things got tense because Count Louvre tried to defend his daughter Tidy, saying that some savages couldn't tarnish his daughter's honor. But of course, Duke Roxanne clarified to this little count that he cannot speak of the heroes that way. With that, they had no choice but to apologize and leave. Even Tidy apologized to Roxanne. She hoped he would let her dance with him as an apology, but Roxanne isn't stupid. He wished to be the dance partner of his friend, the Empress. So, the two beautiful lovebirds began to dance together. He apologized for not introducing himself properly before. But Roxanne really is a name. It's the name he used in his childhood. He hoped that from now on, the Empress, in honor of their friendship, would call him that. That hand, ref. Meanwhile, the beast of an emperor was fuming because even though he doesn't love Sepia, he doesn't want to see her in someone else's arms, especially not Roxanne's. Later, in the palace corridors, Damien met Roxanne. He was surprised he had managed to survive, but he made it clear, even though he's back, he can't talk about the past. He has no choice but to resign himself and accept that he is a loser, because Damien is the winner of the Empire, and now the Empress belongs to him, to Damien. He left Roxanne with a desire to take back absolutely everything that was taken from him. Elsewhere, Count Louvre had gathered his entire family. He was so angry. He had been humiliated by Roxanne, but it was clear it was his own out-of-place comments' fault. Just then, Tidy, between fury and calm, told them not to worry, the Emperor would fix everything. Of course, they already wanted to take advantage of Tidy. They asked her to speak with the Emperor to get a good sword for her brother Garcia. They also wanted a house in the capital, so many things. But Tidy kindly asked them to leave. She would handle everything. After they left and the filthy rat was alone, she showed her true personality. She hated that her supposed family wanted to take advantage of her just because she won the Emperor's heart, but besides that, with her terrible mood, she treated the servants like trash. She didn't even care about humiliating or stepping on them, and hurting them made this crazy woman feel better. Besides, she already had the Emperor eating out of her hands. Now all she needed was to become the Empress. So she went to visit the Emperor, and of course, it went well. She came well prepared not to be rejected, showing everything. Besides, whether she wants to admit it or not, Damien has his charms, but his temper is literally demonic. Seeing Tidy so submissive, Damien thought she was the only one who listens to him. And of course, Tidy isn't the only one. Of course, Tidy knew he was thinking about the Empress. Since that wasn't convenient for her, she showed her personality even more, with his name written on her. And today she was willing to make him happy, because there's something else. She needs to feel even more powerful. To have a child with the Emperor. 2 days passed, and today was the third and final day of the banquet. Sepia was so exhausted and bored because Roxanne hadn't arrived. Although for Sepia, thinking about her friend was a sin. Just then, several young men approached the Empress. They wanted to dance with her and were almost fighting over it, but Sepia didn't understand. Why were they approaching her like this? Then she heard the nobles mention, "The Empress takes a different man to her palace." And of course, all of this was the evil Tidy's doing. A few days ago, this filthy rat started telling one of her maids that the Empress brings a different man to her room every night, and that she was worried about the Emperor because she didn't want him to find out. And of course, she asked her maid not to tell anyone. Today at the banquet, she supposedly defended the Empress. She mentioned that if it isn't true, they shouldn't spread it. And then the brute commented that she was glad the rumor was true, because she was worried Her Majesty the Empress would be lonely because of her existence. But before saying anything, Sister Betty, the Empress's maid, was pushed by Tidy's horrible so-called brother, Gallard Louvre. He didn't even feel sorry for who he pushed. He was so arrogant that he started offering to keep the Empress company tonight. Since he wasn't well, she planned to ignore him. But this idiot almost grabbed her. He couldn't, though, because Roxanne appeared. He grabbed him with and pushed him. He approached Sepia and told her he knows about the rumor circulating about her. He knows it isn't true. But a rumor like that will constantly put her in danger. Then, holding her romantically, he asked her to use him. He planned to become her official lover. Or at least appear to be. Only then would no one approach her. But of course, the toxic Damien was already furious seeing her near his enemy. And because of that situation, Sepia accepted Roxanne's crazy proposal with even more pleasure. Now it's satisfying to see the idiot Emperor suffer. At that moment, the new lovers of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints went out for a walk. And of course, this is part of the plan. However, although Sepia had already accepted, she was a little uneasy. She asked Roxanne if he didn't have someone. And well, Roxanne confessed he has someone very precious. And he loves her, but due to many situations, he had to part from her. It had been a long time since then. He had lost his chance to be with her. Sepia then told him that if it was such an important love, she's surely still waiting for him. Roxanne was happy to hear this, but suddenly they heard two lovebirds kissing nearby, in the bushes. And of course, it was the perfect moment for the rumors to start. Roxanne held Sepia and asked her to just stay still for a moment. He got close enough until the lovebirds from the bushes realized the Empress was kissing the man with Duke Leopold. After faking that kiss, they both returned to the banquet. As soon as they entered, the gossips from the bushes had already spread the rumor. With this, at least no one else will approach the Empress. Now they know her lover is someone so important that no one can surpass him except the Emperor, of course. After achieving their goal, Roxanne and Sepia went to a private room for some wine. Sepia was thanking him for what he did, but then the miserable Emperor appeared with his mistress, who noticed the Emperor couldn't be who he wanted to be. Today I can mention that it seems they don't even want to hide anymore. Damien didn't understand why he should. And of course, Damien mentioned that the Empress has lost her pride and decency. Of course, Sepia left her life. She made it clear that this was only to silence the rumors about her. And even Roxanne mentioned it was his idea and his priority is to protect the Empress. They should also look for the source of these rumors. And while looking at Tidy, he said that person was closer than they think. Because of that, Tidy asked the Emperor to go to the banquet. She was nervous. He agreed, but he warned the Empress. Everyone who gets involved with Duke Leopold has fallen to ruin. And with that comment, even Roxanne said goodbye to Sepia. As the days went by, Mrs. Lemedy was getting Sepia ready when Sepia asked her about the time she has lived in the palace. Lemedy told her that her mother was a maiden to the former Empress, and because of that, Sepia asked about Duke Leopold. She learned from Lemedy that the Duke was a child victim of a horrible rumor. The father of Damien, Emperor Gilliadir, had a brother named Roximus, whom he considered his enemy, and he is Roxanne's father. According to the story, Roximus was the rightful heir to the throne, but it was Gilliadir who became emperor. Because of that, when Roxanne was born, Empress Yurdia, Galadir's wife, began to be received by the monarchy. Jealous of Roxanne, she grew to hate him. Over the years, both Roximus and his wife died from a highly contagious disease. And if Roxanne escaped death, it was because he had gone to study abroad. But it was this coincidence that led them to label Roxanne as the one who brought the disease to the duchy, the one who brought misfortune. They even considered him an impure beast for it. And it got much worse when they had found dead animals and mysterious spells on the floor of the young Duke's room. But Lemedy assured her that the boy was innocent of everything. Just then, Betty appeared, informing Sepia that her lover had come to visit her. So she went to have tea with Roxanne. Surprisingly, she found out the Duke loves Bremen black tea, his beloved's favorite tea, which just so happens to be Sepia's favorite. However, Roxanne's visit was to ask the Empress for a favor, to lend him the map of the imperial castle. He told her his father had hidden a relic in the castle, and he was there to find it. And of course, since Sepia already knows he's like part of the imperial family, she promised to lend it to him, and Roxanne thought to himself, I will visit her every week to show her that we're taking good care of her map. This wasn't necessary. But Roxanne did it to have an excuse to see her. And given the good weather, he hoped Sepia would accompany him for a walk in the garden. They started walking, and because of the winter and snow, everything was slippery. So Roxanne stayed close to her. Then they saw that an uncle had gone to the house. A cute baby fox. She didn't know if it was trapped or not. It was a beast man, but she decided to pet it, although when Roxanne got closer, this little animal got defensive, until it suddenly ran off. For Roxanne, it was better this way. He was already getting jealous and just hoped that between the fox and him, Sepia would like him much more. Meanwhile, at the Crudel mansion, a man appeared shouting, "Look, brother, I'm human now. And so Dante Jasper Cruzda. Caballero Imperial arrived, but he was naked. Jasper quickly went to cover his brother Etensel. He was happy for him. But Etensel told him that he had managed to transform into a human after 20 years of being a simple fox. It was all thanks to the Empress who helped him. That's why he wanted to see her more than ever. Of course, to Jasper, what his brother was saying made no sense. He had to respect the Empress. But this young man, who is supposedly handsome, planned to court the Empress and who knows, maybe become her lover. He hoped that, like what happened to the Emperor's lover, the one named, he would also get Sepia's name on his body, although he already has a rival, Duke Leopold. However, he was now counting on his brother to formally meet the Empress. The days passed. Roxanne had been visiting the Empress constantly. He spent time with her, playing chess, talking, and drinking tea. But today Sepia wanted to know if, as soon as he finds the relic he's looking for, will he return to his territory? Of course, he had to go back. Sepia then told him she knows about his past, about the problems in his lands, and she swore not to distrust him. She sincerely hoped he could clear his name one day. Roxanne was about to speak about it when suddenly, the horrifying Damien appeared. First, he criticized the fact that supposedly, their relationship was only to avoid rumors. But it was obvious those two had something more. Before he could get more annoying, Sepia apologized to Roxanne. And so he left, and Sepia added, "We'll see each other next week." That clearly burned the Emperor up. Left alone, he didn't understand why he had to visit her every time. But he clarified, compared to the times he sees his mistress, she barely sees Roxanne. Besides, more than husband and wife, they are just a partnership working for the good of the people. He didn't understand why he hated the Duke so much. Does it have something to do with his past? He didn't understand why, knowing the Duke's past, she is still with him. But Sepia wasn't going to be swayed by rumors. Besides, Damien has no right to judge her if the Duke really were her lover, as that doesn't stop her from fulfilling her responsibilities as Empress. But saying it like that, Damien awakened his beastly side. He grabbed Sepia forcefully and made it clear they are married. He threw her onto the sofa and, with a much worse mood, told her that governing is one thing, but if they don't live as a married couple now, it hasn't been because of him, since she was the first one to reject him. A few years ago, Sepia went to Sepia's house. Sepia and Damien had finally gotten married. It was their wedding night, but Sepia felt insecure with him. She rejected him, saying she wasn't ready. And of course, today, the idiot reminded her of that time. He didn't even understand why she was so repulsed by him. Although this fool was already asking her, since she says she will never abandon her responsibility as Empress, she must also consider that among those responsibilities, it's her duty to give birth to a successor to the throne. And 5 years had already passed since their wedding. Sepia just asked him that if he wants to sleep with someone, he should do it with his mistress. But this wretch asked, "Does Roxanne already know you're infertile? Besides, you must remember that I am your husband. The only one you can sleep with is me." And so he slowly began to touch Sepia. She was scared, but Damien stopped and reminded her, "You must also fulfill this responsibility." He left her, and as he walked out, Roxanne was waiting for him. Roxanne didn't hesitate to punch the Emperor. Damien couldn't understand how this fool survived the war. But Roxanne had promised to return, and he kept his promise. Then Damien clarified, the Empress will never remember him, ever. Time passed, and winter was about to end. As Sepia walked in the garden, she met Commander Jasper, who had his younger brother with him. Quickly, they both greeted the Empress. And especially Etensel, he presented himself very well. He animatedly introduced himself to the Empress. On the other hand, Jasper came to apologize to Sepia because although the son of Duke Louv was imprisoned for disrespecting the Empress, Gallard had been released from prison immediately. And of course, for Sepia, the commander was not at fault. Then, the commander looked at Betty with a certain gaze. We can see that both Jasper and Betty are winking at each other. Meanwhile, Etensel mentioned he had come to visit because he heard his pet fox had been seen in Her Majesty's garden. Since Sepia saw it, she offered to take him to where she last saw it. So they took a step together. They obviously wouldn't find anything, so they kept looking a little longer. But when they were about to cross a small icy bridge, Etensel offered to take her hand. Sepia, on the other hand, had a big problem. She can't have contact with men. She feels a certain aversion. But as Etensel insisted, she lightly gave him her hand. Feeling anxious and uneasy, she slipped, and luckily, her salvation had arrived. Roxanne added, "I told you to be careful on icy paths, Sepia." This took Sepia back to her past, when she used to walk with Damien in their childhood. After seeing her slip, he had caught her and said the exact same thing Roxanne said today. It was a direct shock to her most precious memories. Roxanne then asked Etensel what brought him here. He mentioned his fox. And for Roxanne, it wasn't good for the Empress to walk in these icy places. Then Etensel asked what brought him to the palace. And it was obvious, wasn't it? He's Her Majesty's lover. He doesn't need excuses to come see his Empress. And since Sepia obviously felt more comfortable with Roxanne than with Etensel, she apologized to Etensel and left at that moment. So that fox left with his tail between his legs. Meanwhile, Roxanne was delighted with the Empress's company. However, his jealousy spoke today. He mentioned that it seems young Etensel wants to use his youthful face to befriend the Empress. And honestly, he said it because Roxanne wants to be the Empress's only friend. And if she thinks he said it just to say it, he didn't. Every word was true. Sepia then asked if he had found his first love yet. Roxanne said yes. But unfortunately, she was already married. Although he knew it was his fault for being late. However, he'll have to wait until her partner is truly worthy of her. Sepia didn't understand what he said, but Roxanne was already saying goodbye. It was very sad. It was very late, and she had to go back. He took her hand, kissed it, and Sepia only felt warmth. Only with him does she not feel that aversion. Meanwhile, Damien had taken his mistress to the winter villa. So this rat already felt even better than the Empress and was delighted. As long as she fills him with love and pleasure, the Emperor will cling more and more to her. So, while watching the snow, she remembered her days of extreme poverty. Back then, she only thought about life. How well they were stuck living like beggars. Fighting for bread, the supposed Empress enjoyed luxury. She had hated her since then. So now that she has the opportunity, she planned to take everything the Empress has. And what better way to achieve it than by making the Emperor never able to leave her? She then began to talk to Damien about the approaching purification ceremony. She wanted him to take her as well. But this was impossible. That ceremony is a special ritual, and only the Empress and the Emperor can go to that place. She apologized for being impertinent, but she hated having to share her man. Hearing this, Damien felt all-powerful. And well, it ended with them being like rats with this filthy rat. Days later, they notified the Felicit that someone had come to visit. And just by looking at him, we know he's an evil magician, allied with this witch. The days passed, and the long-awaited purification ceremony arrived. And well, today Sepia was going to see Damien after that tremendous scare he gave her that time. She still remembered his words about her obligation to produce an heir. But of course, to Damien, Sepia is barren, so I don't understand his obsession. So she met with the cold Emperor, and together they left for the temple where the ceremony would take place. Today, the ritual will reveal the fortune or misfortune of the year. And both must immerse themselves in the temple's sacred lake, spending a day together, washing away all evil. Sepia and Damien did so, but Sepia had a certain longing to see the sea. Damien, seeing her distracted, asked what was wrong, and Sepia told him she had never seen the sea. He just found it strange, that's all. But Sepia remembered. In their childhood, Damien had promised to take her to see the sea. Then Damien added that if she fulfills her duties as Empress, he will take her to see the sea. And of course, he's referring to the history of humanity. He means giving him children, or more than that, giving herself to him. Suddenly, Damien felt dizzy. And before he knew it, this fool fainted in the water. If it had been me, I would have let him drown. But Sepia is so good. She pulled him out and soon noticed that his body was burning with fever. She was about to call the attendants, but Damien stopped her. He begged her to stay there for a moment, while he hugged her. Sepia was still worried until Damien said with an aggressive voice, "No, you're my wife, right?" Seeing that Sepia didn't respond, he reacted suddenly and threw her to the ground. He began to strangle and drown her, telling her that she is only for him, only his. He snapped out of it, just in time because Sepia was about to run out of air. The next day, as they left the temple, Sepia couldn't believe Damien didn't remember what he did yesterday. Just then, Tidy arrived, all worried about his majesty. She saw he had a fever and begged him to go to the doctor. So Sepia asked for help for the emperor. But then Damien tried to touch his wife. Sepia got scared, and he went crazy. He laughed like a lunatic and said to Tidy, "You're mine, right?" "Yes, of course." This fool obviously said yes. And when he saw that Sepia really couldn't stand him, he ended up telling the entire empire that the fortune for this year is misfortune. It's said that there are several types of fortunes. Among them is the great fortune that appears as a special light seen in the temple. Then there's stable fortune. And finally, misfortune, which is like a warning for the empire to be on alert for bad luck. Everyone didn't understand why. It's said that since the Empress arrived in the empire, there has been great fortune, but there was nothing to be done about this. Weeks passed, and Roxanne was still reviewing the map of the imperial palace, and so far nothing. His people were helping him search for the relic, but no matter how much they searched, they couldn't find it and couldn't stop. They had to find the relics that Roxanne's father had left for him. Was that the only reason he returned to the imperial palace? He remembered that when his father was about to die, he told him that one day the black calamity will ride upon the red-eyed beast, and it will devour the empire. That's why he had to find the Eye of the Wolf and its companion, which were hidden in the imperial city. Only they will protect the empire. Roxanne remembered those words and knew the red eyes must refer to Damien, but for now, what interested him most was knowing about Sepia. From his assistant, he learned that since the purification ceremony ended a few weeks ago and misfortune was declared, the Empress has been very worried. And of course, Roxanne knew he couldn't stay with her. She was surely already doing something about it. He was dying to see her. Meanwhile, Sepia had been working day and night. She knew she couldn't keep working. If the empire falls into misfortune this year, it means the people with the fewest resources will suffer. She was already organizing the budgets, but on the other hand, she couldn't concentrate completely. She had been dreaming too much about that day when Damien almost killed her by strangling her, and just then, she was informed that the emperor had come to see her. The idiot just wanted to increase Tidy's budget, even with the money meant for charity, since for him, it was natural for the weak not to survive. Sepia refused. She couldn't do that. She understood he hated her for rejecting him, but she couldn't do that to her people. And well, in that case, Damien wanted to negotiate. She can continue with her charity and keep his mistress's annual budget intact. Only if she fulfills her duty as Empress. If she accepts, he will be waiting for her in his chambers. After that horrible comment, Sepia felt caught between a rock and a hard place. If she fulfills her obligation and sleeps with her husband, she can save the poor. The poor, but she couldn't even get close to him, so how would she do it? Suddenly, Roxanne appeared and stroked her. Seeing her holding back her tears, he told her that sometimes it's good to cry. So Sepia let it all out. And later they went to Roxanne's room together, where they could talk peacefully with his friends. His company, she felt warmth, but Roxanne wanted her to talk about her problem. Sepia still didn't feel safe talking about it. And seeing her uncomfortable, Roxanne proposed a game in which they would each share a secret. So Roxanne told her. He had problems with a part of his memory, that's why he was called to life. That's why he couldn't keep his promise and return to his beloved. It took him a long time to remember everything. And that's why his beloved suffered. On the other hand, Sepia confessed that she feels discomfort and fear with the person who should be closest to her. And it even happens with other men. But after confessing this, they both felt at ease. A week later, Sepia went to visit Lord Elrond, the director of the Rebrandts orphanage. Today, Sepia had organized a meeting with the 8 directors of the orphanages from each district. At the meeting, each one felt more important than the other, but for the Empress, no district was more or less important. She began to review the budget, and the money they had left would only last about 2 weeks. It seemed the situation was worse than she imagined. She thought that perhaps the only way to solve this was to give herself to Damien. However, just as she was about to mention that it could be solved, she heard a commotion outside. And when she went out, she saw a bunch of carriages with many units, supplies for the orphanages and, of course, seeing Roxanne's knights, the door opened. She didn't know who was supporting her. So when she saw Roxanne, she wanted to know why. Why is he doing this? For Roxanne, this was like rent payment for giving them food and lodging since they entered the capital. And of course, it was a donation, not just from Roxanne, but from all his knights. Sepia should take it as an act from a donor to the director of charitable affairs. So they went to talk in private, and Roxanne asked her not to overthink it. He was just making his contribution like any other noble of the empire, but Sepia knew if she accepted, Roxanne would get into trouble with the emperor. But well, Roxanne didn't care about that either. Besides, Azel was in an irreversible relationship with the emperor, so he can't be expelled. He asked her to calm down and to help the process, formally handed over the police that had given him the money, the amount of his donation, plus extra money for her budget. And given everything Roxanne and his people were doing, Sepia couldn't refuse to accept. And now she knew what it was like to have a true friend. But Roxanne asked her for a favor, that she must learn to value her life, to value herself more. And she can use him for that. Weeks passed, and Damien found out what Roxanne was doing. He learned he donated to the Empress for charity work, and it was precisely for a budget that had been cancelled. Besides, Roxanne has now named himself as a partner who works on charity projects with the Empress, and since Roxanne took the initiative for donations, nobles quickly joined the cause. A rumor has spread that the Emperor abandoned the charity work just to give a larger budget to his mistress. And they were coming to the meeting with nobles, right? He lost his reason again, hurt his hand with a wine glass, and ended the meeting. He went out, and Tidy was following him like a lapdog. Although when Damien saw the Empress, he asked if she was satisfied. She was tarnishing Tidy's honor just to maintain her charities. He was sure she spread this rumor. But no, it's not like that. Sepia never mentioned anything about it, and to avoid more fights, she preferred to ignore him. Good morning, Sepia visited one of the orphanages. She saw all the children so happy, they had everything they needed to feel good. Everything necessary, thanks to Roxanne. At night, Roxanne and Sepia went for a walk. Sepia was so grateful to him. He was a great friend. But then Roxanne confessed. He doesn't do it just because they are friends. Roxanne confessed that his greatest desire is to become everything to her. Deep down, Sepia already knew his heart. Her heart, but she apologized because she couldn't accept his feelings. Sepia wanted to maintain her virtue of perfection and mother of the empire. At that, Roxanne mentioned he will wait for the Sepia who is not an empress. So she shouldn't ask him to hide what he feels. It will be there, waiting for her. Since that day, to stop thinking about Roxanne, Sepia had been busy day and night creating budgets and organizing everything. Until one day, Mrs. Sweeney came to visit. She went to receive her, and she is a human without. One of the most important among the nobility. And she had come to inform her about her large donation. It was all because she was grateful that the Empress doesn't abandon charity and takes care of the Rembrandt's palace. That palace is a place full of memories for her because she lived there with the former Empress until the end. And of course, she was referring to the fact that Tidy coveted that palace, but Sepia didn't let her use it. However, another reason for her visit is because she heard the Emperor doesn't want to support her in organizing the charity. And today she asked Sepia, is it really necessary to have the Emperor's approval? She needs to know that the Empress has much more power than she thinks. She then said goodbye, but just then, Mrs. Lemedy was about to enter, and upon seeing the lady, Mrs. Sweeney quickly hid. Sepia noticed it, and later she asked her about the situation. Mrs. Lemedy quickly bowed before the Empress. She told her that she had omitted something about Duke Leopold's story. She too had believed in the demonic magic in Roxane's room, until she learned the truth from her mother. She had seen the same type of demonic circle in the basement of the late Empress Uriel's palace. Only then did she know that it had all been a trap to bring down the true heir of the Demon King. And the next day, when she returned to the palace, she saw Miss Sweeney leaving there. When she reached the basement, it was clean. And since then, Lemedy and her mother had kept silent to survive. Hearing this, doubts flooded Sepia's mind. She even remembered Sweeney's words. Therefore, she concluded that Sweeney hates Damien more than Roxane. But why? What were they hiding so desperately? Meanwhile, the rat Tidy was meeting with the dark magician. She clearly owed this guy a lot. However, as they say, allying with a viper means sooner or later being poisoned by it. Tidy was completely under his power. But Tidy was very happy, as the Emperor now spends all his time at her place, and he is irritated by the Empress. At this, the man was pleased and reminded her she only needs to give the Emperor a son. Her mark will become authentic. Then, Titia remembered her past. She used to sell flowers to survive until this man found her. He was captivated by the beauty of this white servant and proposed without hesitation to make her the Emperor's mistress. That's how Titia ended up entering the palace. Since it's important to him that this rat stays with the Emperor, he returned to the rat's house. He used his magic again to clarify the mark of Tidy on her chest, and that's why his visits to this white rat will be every month. Only then, she will maintain the mark for as long as it takes to conceive a child with the Emperor. And of course, that pleased this man. He even whispered to her today to go and find the Emperor because at this moment, the power of the name is stronger. And so the idiotic rat left, saying yes, Sir Blair, but when she went to see the Emperor, she was horrified by everything around her. And as she went deeper, she ended up tripping. She tripped over something, and it wasn't something nice. On her path were several animals, lifeless, torn apart, and bled out. And in the darkness was Damien with his wife, turning into a beast. That's how Titia knew that her beloved is a hybrid of human and beast, who was also scared because he couldn't control his instincts. Tidy felt his desperation. She ran to hug and comfort him, telling him she hadn't seen anything and that she will always be by his side. Over the days, Sepia was already organizing everything for the construction of a new orphanage. And of course, she was never alone. Roxane always came to her to collaborate in any way he could. Although, ever since Roxane confessed his feelings, Sepia feels very embarrassed. But that didn't stop Sepia from being sweet with him. Today she even gave him an invitation to be seen for the charity party, although the mischievous Roxane already asked if this was a request to be his partner. Sepia didn't know where to hide and accepted. Yes, that's exactly what she wanted. But seeing her blush, he added that he loves seeing her like that because it means he matters to her. And so, to not kill her with embarrassment, he added that he would pick her up that day. That fantastic day arrived. Sepia had received a dress from Roxane, and of course, upon arriving at the event, she knew why. They were both dressed in matching outfits, and since Roxanne is an open book, it didn't take long for him to let in flies into his mouth from admiring Sepia's beauty. And besides, today they were both dressed in my favorite color, which surprisingly is also theirs, but they entered the event together. Sepia immediately made a toast, hoping that this meeting would kindle the fire of benevolence, but then the emperor and his mistress arrived to completely ruin the moment, because everyone knew that Damien, instead of being a man of the people and helping charity, blocked all funds to give them to that two-legged rat. And because of this, Roxanne declared to His Majesty that this meeting was only for donors. And since it was, Damien came to give a check to Sepia. With this, they couldn't kick him out of the party, so Sepia had to welcome him, but when she was about to walk away, the brute Damien grabbed her roughly, claiming that since he's done his part now, Sepia must grant him some time. Thank you. Even the rat tidy was confused by this, and since he was acting like an animal, Sepia preferred to return his check than to sell her time as if she were an object. And that's when he got brutish. He slowly exploded at Sepia, but Roxanne asked the emperor to stop. Since the atmosphere started to get bad, Sepia agreed to go talk with the emperor. And of course, it was without the riffraff tidy. Give me Junior. So they went out to the balcony. The emperor wanted to understand why she has returned to war. It's so difficult to talk to her. She seems like prey wanting to escape. And he starts to feel a deep pity for her. So much so that this idiot says he's starting to lose his mind. He clarified that he has been waiting so long for her company, but he definitely knows she will never open her mouth to him. Her heart. But she should know that even though she managed to open this charity event, he wasn't upset. Sepia partly understood him, but she couldn't love him. She told him there was a time long ago when she did open her heart to him. And Damien mentioned, "Let the brothers of the empire die." Damien quickly said that's not it. He only opposed the charity organization for her own good. But for Sepia, this was absurd. If she doesn't have the necessary funds, all the beasts that shed their skin will end up freezing in winter. And they had already had enough losses in the past winter. But for Damien, only the strong survive. It's the law of nature. And Sepia couldn't accept his point of view, let alone consider her citizens as beasts. And from today on, she made it clear to the emperor that her heart will never open for him again. She left the balcony. She found Roxanne waiting for her. He knew she was tired of all this. He asked to accompany her for tea, and when they were in Sepia's room, Roxanne left. He told her his request to have tea was risky. It seemed more like a proposal to accompany her to her room. And as she got embarrassed, Sepia opened the windows. But Roxanne asked her to be careful. Lately in the Empire, they were finding more and more dead animals in the forest and palace gardens. Sepia had already heard about this, but Roxanne clarified he has no clues as to who it is. And maybe that beast was even intentional. Or it could be the work of some non-human being that has completely lost its mind. Sepia thought that if this is the case, then it's extremely dangerous, so they had to find the culprit before people were in danger. Roxanne promised to help her, but he asked her not to be sad. Though then Sepia told him she needed to tell him something. She told him everything Mrs. Lemedy had said, and when Roxanne heard it, he was more certain that the warnings he was given not to get close to the Dowager Empress Yardiel were well-founded. That had changed his destiny. But still, there were more problems. However, for now, he didn't plan to tell her about it. Night came, and while Sepia was resting, she heard a small noise at her window. When she opened it, there was that cunning fox. She held it with great affection, but then it escaped and ran behind a column. The fox had already transformed. It transformed into Etensel. She was confused, but he asked her to forgive him. He knew it was a terrible thing. He acted like a fox and deceived the Empress. Sepia was about to call the guards. She was furious. So Etensel told her a half-truth. He told her he had spent 20 years trapped in his fox body and only After being petted by her, had he been able to transform into a human? So she is his savior. And he added that he can't change into a human without her. Apparently, she, as the star of Ishtar, heals his illness. But then he started lying, telling her he's not 100% cured. That after a certain time, he turns back into a fox again. And only if she touches him can he regain his human form. He begged her to help him. He didn't want to live as a fox again. And well, Sepia had a repulsion for humans, but maybe she could help him while he's an animal. She agreed, but for now, she asked him to leave without anyone seeing him. She would send a letter to House Crudel. So Edense left and was sorry for lying to the Empress, but it was his only way to stay in contact with her. Because he has the power to read the essence of a human being. And Roxanne's essence. It's what he longs for, the perfect embodiment of a male. And the only way to snatch such divinity was by getting close to the Empress. The next day, Damien came to visit the Empress. He discovered the Empress approved a document for the creation of a new department. She told him she wanted an official place for charity as a new entity of the crown. But Damien laughed and asked with whose permission she would do it. Sepia presented herself as the Empress of the Bestial Empire and star of Ishtar and clarified. She is subject to special laws of the Empire. Among them, it clearly says that she can establish a department without the Emperor's permission. And that, of course, she found out thanks to Miss Sweeney's clue. Today, furious, she didn't understand why the Emperor never told her about her rights. But Damien is a heartless demon. He swore that even if she founds that department, it will never have the proper budget. But Sepia, as Empress, can support the budget's independence. For that, she needs 2 members of the royal family. And other high-ranking nobles, higher than a marquis. Damien was surprised, but he knew she wouldn't get the noble support, and he has no intention of supporting her. But apparently, Damien had forgotten there is another member of the royal family, and she was clearly referring to Roxanne, who surprisingly had been in the Empress's room. He didn't understand what he was doing there, but Sepia had already been meeting with Roxanne before the Emperor arrived. She told him that he will be the vice president of the charity department. And Roxanne, so happy, presented the approved document because he is more than a duke, he is a member of the royal family. For Damien, this was treason, but Sepia was only seeking the good of the empire. Although what hurt Damien the most is that Sepia had allied with his worst enemy. Now he knew he had been scorned by the Empress, and he even understood it because as emperor, he has a great disadvantage. He never inherited the Drodiana seal. It's said that this seal is the symbol of the emperor. It's actually a pair of seals that contain the power of the gods, and Damien had to choose the symbol to inherit them, but it is said that the previous emperor lost them, although others think they think the emperor hid them, rejecting Damien. And that became his greatest weakness. Sepia clarified that she didn't remember. She rejects him because he doesn't have the seal. Besides, it was said to be lost. But Damien knew the truth. However, for Sepia, he is still the emperor. But Damien wanted to understand then why she rejected him. And Sepia knew she didn't reject him. It was because he is with another woman. Or because he almost strangled her. But because he doesn't take care of his citizens. Then, Damien told her she can say whatever she wants, but she is still his wife. However, she has already hurt him by being with the beast he hates most. Just then, Damien started to get a severe headache. His bestial form was emerging, and, because of this, he ended up hurting Sepia's hand. He left quickly and begged his wife. He began to heal her hand. Although he soon told her that he had managed to find the relic his father had left him. A few days ago, on the night of the charity banquet, it occurred to Roxanne to superimpose the map of the Imperial Palace and the map of the Empire, and a figure of Drodiana appeared. The symbol of the royal family and its eyes, and the first relic, was hidden in the Empress's basement. He went to that place and, after breaking a wall, he managed to find a statue of a wolf. Today, in the back of its mouth was the Drodiana seal. So today he told Sepia he had found one. He's missing one more, but he already returned the map to the Empress. This saddened Sepia. It meant that he had to return to his territory. But Roxanne, kneeling before her, said it won't be like that because there is someone he doesn't want to leave. Referring to her, obviously. But a week passed. Sepia was delighted. From Betty, she knew everyone in the Empire supports the Empress for her charitable act, and that's very good. Though just then Commander Jasper appeared, bringing with him Etensel in his fox form. Since Betty was around, Sepia asked the commander to accompany her maid, as it was clear they had good chemistry. So the commander went to see Betty, and seeing them so happy, Sepia thought of Roxanne. Although then, Rufio started to yelp. Sepia became uncomfortable because now she knows he's a beast. It didn't feel comfortable petting him, even though he was adorable. But at the same time, it did feel comfortable petting him. Suddenly, after touching him, this cunning fox turned into a man. And just like that, he wasn't cute to Sepia anymore. Where the hell are things? So, after completing her mission, Sepia added to her family and son. Said they would see each other in 10 days. And although Etensel wanted to spend time with her, Sepia didn't want that. For some reason, she felt more uncomfortable with him and was worried she couldn't get over this reaction. In a few days, the charity department was ready. And Roxanne had arrived much earlier than anyone else. As vice president, he took his responsibility of receiving the president to heart. Although he noticed Sepia was very uneasy, and with everything Sepia felt, she opened up to him, telling him she has an aversion to men and feels the same way about Etensel. She thought no one could understand her, but Roxanne did. He knew she suffered a lot in the past, and feeling understood made her feel better. So Sepia told him that Etensel claims to have an illness, but she doesn't know if it's really true. So she asked Roxanne to help her investigate the transformation. She confessed that when he's in his fox form, there's no such aversion. But when he transforms, it makes her uncomfortable, though she couldn't ignore a sick citizen of the Empire. Although at that moment, you didn't know about the slip? Supporting Roxanne. At this, Sepia wanted to run and call the maid. But Roxanne took the opportunity to hold her. He brought her hand to his bare chest, asking if her aversion is the same with him. She said she's fine, at least a little. And Roxanne, the mischievous one, took the opportunity to offer himself as her experiment. She can practice her aversion with him, since she feels less rejection with him. He undressed a little, asking her to touch him a bit more. And since Sepia is not made of stone, she felt his pecs. It's firm, and his warm skin felt good. Lord, some people have all the luck. Little by little, she started to feel more at ease, and Roxanne was leaning in to kiss her when Mrs. Lemedy interrupted, bringing urgent news. Rather, bad news. The rat Tidy has conceived a little mouse. Well, she's pregnant with the brute emperor's child. It's all over. The days passed and Tidy, along with the Empress, announced the pregnancy. A few days ago, she was so excited when it was confirmed. However, the most important thing for the Empire is to verify the baby's species. They perform a famous locket test. The parents must let their blood drop onto the locket. And if it mixes, their child will be a sacred beast. If not, it will be a servant like its mother. And of course, the uncertainty today had her anxious. Because if it's a servant, the Emperor will reject it. So the ritual began. And they both cut themselves. They let a little of their blood fall, and Tidy was relieved because her baby will be a sacred beast. With this, Tidy was happy. She will be the mother of the next emperor. Although Damien wasn't happy, as Titia mentioned, it was time to announce to everyone that they are going to have an imperial prince. But that's not how it works. The child of a simple mistress is an illegitimate child of the imperial family. Tidy was furious, but those were the laws in the Empire. And whether she liked it or not, Tidy was not special. The rat asked Damien to say something, and this brute said he will announce the prince's birth in 2 weeks. So all the nobles present left. Left alone, Damien clarified to Tidy, the prince will be adopted by the Empress, and she, obviously, will be left without a child. Later, Sepia was listening to everything that happened today from Mrs. Lemedy. That Tidy will give birth to a perfect prince. But then Lemedy knelt before Sepia, begging her to adopt the lady's son. Miss Tidy, because that child is now illegitimate, but if Sepia adopts him, no one can be against her or the baby. Even the emperor himself will propose this to her today. Sepia knew that no matter what, that child will look for his mother sooner or later. And she remembered her childhood, where she was ignored and without her parents' love. But because of this, Lemedy begged her to accept. Only then will she consolidate her position. But just then, the beast of an emperor arrived. He asked to speak with her alone. He quickly informed her that Tidy will give birth to a prince. Seeing that she didn't react, Sepia understood that she already knows. And still she remains cold and distant. So she surely knows what's happening. That he came to ask her to adopt Tidy's son as her own. Sepia hesitated a little, but firmly refused. She wasn't certain she could come to love that child. The child, but Damien laughed. She was talking about love, and at what she said, he mentioned that in that case, should he teach Tidy about politics? Hinting that he could make Tidy the Empress. But he soon grabbed Sepia roughly. He told her if she doesn't like his new idea, then she should accept that child. Sepia refused again and again, and, because she refused, Damien went crazy. He slapped her and hit her, throwing things at her non-stop. He shouted about everything he did for her. And Sepia added, "Unfortunately, you no longer had feelings for the emperor." Damien dropped everything he was about to throw and approached her. He wanted to check something, to find out if it's true or not. That she can't conceive after being with him. Now he knows she can have children, so why not do it with his wife? He was approaching her roughly when Sepia slapped him. I want to punch him too. She already got over the fact that he strangled her. And if she did, it was out of compassion. Sometimes he just seems like a wounded child, but that compassion ends today. For her, it's clear that he is a beast who shows his strength to the weak. And she walked away without looking back. That's my girl. The next day, Sepia had a severe headache. Betty, who came to see her, asked her not to do it again. She had never had a drop of alcohol in her life, and yesterday she had drunk too much. Sepia remembered coming to her mother's house. But after that, she doesn't remember anything. Then Betty told her that luckily, Duke Roxanne had prepared an antidote for her, and laughing at Sepia, she said that from her face, she really doesn't remember anything. Although the one who did remember was Roxanne. Last night, he had come to see Sepia on business. But seeing her unconscious on the sofa, he ran to her. He soon noticed Sepia was lost in alcohol. And the drink was a super strong one. Because of that, Roxanne prepared an antidote. But since she was out of it, he noticed there was a problem. He had no choice but to apply a method that supposedly isn't considered a kiss. Oh, sure. So he took the antidote in his mouth. Then, with a kiss, he passed the antidote to her and made her drink it. And almost instantly after finishing remembering all this, Sepia came to see him. She thanked Roxanne for helping her with the antidote. But seeing that he didn't respond, she imagined what was going to happen. Maybe she made some mistake. Sepia apologized. She had never drunk like that before. Maybe she made a mistake, but Roxanne told her no, she just shouldn't drink in front of another man. And of course, Sepia promised him. Meanwhile, Damien was like a madman. In the middle of the forest, killing birds. Hey dude, stop. And thinking about his Empress, the star of Ishtar. Who was his first choice? However, since he was already crazy, today he said he wanted to kill. Kill much more. And then the dark mage Blighter appeared. He offered to help the emperor. Over the days, an edict was made known to the people, informing that the heir to the throne has been conceived. Everyone knew that being so, the Empress would adopt the son of the mistress. And that wasn't nice for the rat. This crazy woman was so angry because now she had to give her baby to the Empress. And her doing so much for that man. You're worth it, right? She remembered that on the day of the ceremony, she asked the Emperor if he only used her to give him a son. But Damien told her it has to be this way. If he wants his son to be a prince, then the Empress must adopt him. And today, in a fit of madness, she held a broken piece of glass, thinking of stabbing herself because she didn't plan to give anything to the Emperor. Luckily, a maid stopped her, saying that the merchant Blair had arrived, obviously referring to the dark mage. Tidy ran to see him. She was frustrated. She cried. She had done so much. And now she won't have her baby. But then, Blair hugged her. He told her not to ruin her pretty face, because everything will be fine. Besides, she must take care of her precious child. And then, Titia said she'd rather destroy it than give it to the Empress. But when she saw this man's gaze, she dropped her hand and said, and with her gaze she was committed. With a lost look, she said, "What the hell am I thinking? Oh, my baby. You will grow up strong and healthy, forgive your mother." And of course, all this was just manipulation by Blair, although his snake already wanted to kill Tidy. He endured her, but Blair asked him to wait. That naive girl is still useful. So, he talked with her. He said it was unfair that they were trying to take her baby. But he also knew that if the Empress doesn't adopt him, then her baby will be illegitimate. Although he had a solution. No one will take him from her. He will make that baby the prince. And it's very simple to do. Make Tidy the Empress. And while the more he talked to her, the more he brainwashed her. Because from his point of view, he could do that for her as long as she pays the price today. What he needs is a book he has been looking for, and she will have to give it to him. She has to do it when she becomes Empress, as only the Empress can touch it. And it's hidden in the deepest part of the imperial chambers. Meanwhile, Sepia had gone to visit her brother. To Roxanne without telling him. She soon noticed that it was all very solid, who obviously caught his friend. All of Roxanne's knights arrived severely wounded. When she found out Roxanne was also in the same condition, she ran to see him. He was all bandaged up and had many scars. As she got closer, Roxanne noticed her and told her not to worry about him. It's something that can't be helped. Simple, but Sepia was really worried. She mentioned her heart almost stopped when she saw him like this. And Roxanne loved that. But since he's fine, he asked her to check for herself, so he took her hand and asked her to touch his body. After a little touching, she discovered there was nothing. I know he's fine. Very fine. But she wanted to know what happened. She discovered they had all been injured in an attack. And it wasn't a beast, but beastmen. They claimed to be inhabitants of Leopold. It was all confusing, brought to the city. It concerns his lands, and they were attacking him specifically. Besides, they looked like savage beings, not ordinary beastmen. But they had reason and will. They had captured one, and he, over and over again, repeated the same thing. It's your fault. A disease has invaded our lands. At this, Sepia also offered to help with the investigation. But then, after looking at him for so long, she got embarrassed. She thought about waiting for him outside until he got dressed, although when Roxanne sat up a little, Sepia noticed something very curious. Roxanne had a huge scar on his waist. She asked how long he's had it, but Roxanne almost dodged the question. He said he doesn't remember. Then Sepia began to remember. A few years ago, she went into the forest. We were in the forest. She was fed up with the Empire and the Emperor. Everything was terrifying. Until wild wolves saw her. They ran after her to attack. Sepia thought she would die, but then a white wolf appeared. It was Damien. After their fight, he ended up wounded in the waist. And today, seeing Roxanne like this, she felt it was the same one. And she called him Damien. Sepia then snapped out of it, asking for forgiveness for touching him so suddenly. But now Sepia was more confused than before and wondered, what would Roxanne be like in his true form? But unfortunately, she won't be able to see him like that, since they only reveal their identity to the person they choose. Sepia then changed the subject. She was worried about everything related to Leopold. And Roxanne too, because it's the home where he grew up. That territory is beautiful, it has forests without a sea, and upon mentioning that, Sepia was surprised. She liked the idea of that landscape, but then Roxanne offered to take her there someday. It would be her first time visiting the sea, and he wanted to be by her side. Although hearing this, Sepia remembered. She never told Roxanne that she's never seen the sea. She only told Damien in their childhood. Later, she returned to the palace. And at the entrance, she met Eaton's. He said he's been fine lately, but he wanted to take a little walk with her. So, after walking, Sepia told him that she knows his whole illness is a lie because a few minutes ago after taking him with Roxanne, he had told her that the illness of not being able to transform at will is usually because the parents are of different species. But in the Crudel family, that has never happened. Besides, beastmen manage to transform at an undetermined time in their adulthood. And from there, the change is voluntary. So Roxanne knew, Etensel just wanted to get close to her. Today Sepia asked him why, and Etensel told her that next to the Empress, there is an incomparable suitor, a male worthy of admiration. And that was the only way to get close to her. Sepia didn't hesitate to reject his feelings. And although Etensel already knew, he asked her to be careful. She must be careful with His Majesty the Emperor, and that was all he could tell her. He said goodbye and swore to stay away, unless she required his help. Left alone, Sepia began to walk through her garden. She was tired and overwhelmed by everything that happened today, until she smelled blood. She saw that the lake was stained red and, looking at her feet, she found a dead animal. She began to look all around her until finally, she saw Damien covered in blood and in the lake. Sepia now knew that Damien is the beast from the rumors. But she didn't understand why. Then, Damien told her he was just hunting. As a hobby, nothing more. But for Sepia, this was horrible. What Damien did, he mentioned, is it not something you like? At least they were animals and not beastmen. But Sepia was stunned and Damien reacted badly. He shouted that all of this is her fault. But when he was getting out of the water, Sepia noticed his body was intact. There was no scar on his waist. Which means that really, he is not the Damien she knew in her childhood. Sepia asked him who he really is. And Damien got scared. He told her he's obviously her husband and the ruler of the empire. But Sepia already knew he and the one she knows from childhood are not the same person. And Damien said he doesn't know what she's talking about. Then Sepia remembered the rumors that they sent the prince to study abroad, specifically for 5 years. During that time, someone took his place. Sepia asked him. She asked why he deceived her, and Damien replied it's something she asked for that helped the Empire of Urian, but Sepia had sent a letter to Damien, not His Majesty. But this fool didn't care about that, because the one who saved her was him, and now she is his wife. Sepia, indignant, told him he cheated, perhaps, and only accepted her letter because she is the one who did wrong. Star of Ishtar. Damien clarified it wasn't just for that. He wanted to take everything that was his. Sepia knew what he meant, the boy she loves, and remembering the wound Roxanne's wound, she understood. Is Roxanne actually her first and only love? Just then, Damien said, Empress, I love you. Maybe at first, it was for fun and for the prophecy. But I really fell in love with you. Besides, you claimed to be his savior. And she promised to be his ally. Although Sepia had never promised him that. Then Damien went crazy. I was the one who saved you. I've been the one by your side. And he suddenly began to transform. Sepia just wanted to run to let him know she knows the whole truth. However, Damien transformed into a giant wolf, with eyes full of hatred and bloodlust, and speaking He regretted that she now knows the truth. However, she will never stop belonging to him. Never. And then Sepia slipped. At that, Damien ordered the guards to lock up the Empress. And no matter how much she wanted to see Roxanne, she could do absolutely nothing. Over the days, Sepia woke up. She was not in her palace. But luckily, Lemedy was by her side to serve her. She told her she had been in bed for 2 days, and when she lost consciousness, she remembered everything that happened and got scared. She asked where she was. Apparently, they were locked in the Duke's palace, an abandoned place. She is in confinement. And that wasn't all. She was given a house. A letter for Sepia, which was a divorce decree. For the sole reason of refusing to share a bed with the Emperor. Sepia read that it would be in a month, which means she'll be locked up there for that whole time. But the worst part is, it seems, Damien plans to make Tidy the Empress. Damien had even changed the records of the charity department, giving that credit to Tidy. No one believes him, but for their survival, they pretend they do. And although none of this matters to her anymore, Sepia was sad because during all this time she won't be able to see Roxanne. Meanwhile, Tidy, upon learning what was happening to Sepia, decided to write her a letter, saying she's sending fruits for her to take care of her health. P.S. Congratulations on your divorce. And thinking about how she is going to be impoverished, gave years of life to this 2-legged rat. Just then Damien appeared, and Tidy happily hugged her man. What more could she want? She now had absolutely everything for herself. Revenge. Revenge. We all want revenge. Now, yes. Justice. Time passed, and the day of the trial. The divorce trial arrived, so let the bastard enter. And then Sepia, the light of the empire, passed by. Everyone noticed Sepia was not well. She was gaunt, tired, and now sad because she didn't see Roxanne. The Emperor, meanwhile, was furious. Seeing her look for his enemy, and with more pleasure, he began the trial. At that moment, they summoned the priest of the Sea Temple, Siltasane of Brodion, who is the one who was honored to be before the Emperor and the Star of Ishtar. The Emperor explained the reason for the divorce, that she doesn't want to sleep with her husband. And when the priest confirmed it with Sepia, she stated that it is true, that she has never shared a bed with His Majesty, not once. For the high priest, there was nothing more to add. Procreating an imperial heir is the most important task of the Empress. Refusing, without a doubt, was reason enough for divorce. And so he asked Damien if he accepts the divorce. This brute accepted, and Sepia, obviously, did too. And so the high priest who had officiated that marriage approved the divorce between the Emperor and the Empress. Therefore, Sepia Valle was removed from her title as Empress. After the divorce, Damien approached Sepia, as she is still the Star of Ishtar. So he told her that since her destiny is linked to that of the Beast-Human Empire, she is named Grand Duchess Consort. Sepia didn't understand why. There is no Grand Duke in the Empire, which means she will have to live like a ghost. And Damien added, she won't be able to leave the Grand Duke's palace and not even be able to meet anyone without his permission. And that will be for all eternity. Sepia tried to refuse, but he is the Emperor, and his palace is that of humanity. The law, so Sepia had no alternative. But of course, Tidy was happy. She had won. Upon returning to the Duke's palace, Sepia could only cry. Now she had nothing, she couldn't even talk to Roxanne, although at least Lemedy stayed by her side. Sepia begged her to leave, if she stays she'll be buried like her, but Lemedy had no intention of abandoning her. For her, Sepia will always be her empress, the only one who has always looked out for the people. The only benevolent one. So even though all this has happened, she is still worthy of her admiration, so she never thought of leaving or stopping caring for her. That night, Sepia rested. And then she heard a noise in the hallway. She didn't know if it was Lemedy, but she decided to investigate anyway. The place was gloomy, she was scared. And she thought it better to return to her room. But just like that, a hole appeared in the floor. She began to fall and fall until she was suddenly caught by her great hero, Roxanne. Applause. For a moment she thought she was hallucinating, but looking around she noticed she couldn't see that there was an underground tunnel. Roxanne just wanted to know if she was okay. And Sepia, just coming out of her supposed hallucination, noticed he was real. Now she was fine and Roxanne, after saying that, left. He said before they talk, they must go to a safe place. He added that he had missed her very much. After a few minutes, Sepia was in the forest on the outskirts of the Imperial Palace. And there, Roxanne's men were waiting for her, now calling her Grand Duchess. But Sepia then noticed they were trying to take her away in secret. Roxanne told her this is not illegal unless they get caught. And although they told her, they didn't tell anyone. Sepia hated the idea of leaving the place. The place she fought so hard for, she accepted. Because now she would be with her true love. But she was still worried about Miss Lemedy. Although Roxanne had already worked on that, in 2 days she will also be rescued. As Sepia understood, Lemedy knew about this plan. So Roxanne told her that right now they will go to Leopold. With everything ready, they left immediately. Sepia knew she was fleeing but felt peace. She finally felt free. Days later, Roxanne, while carrying her, woke her up. He asked her to open her eyes slowly. And when Sepia looked, she could admire his face. A beautiful landscape, admiring the fantastic sea. Sepia felt that these 10 days with him had been worth it. And of course, Roxanne was happy. He said he had fulfilled his promise to share with her her first sight of the ocean. Then Sepia asked, "Why did you never tell me you were Damien? That you were my true love?" Roxanne, after hearing that question, was immensely happy. Because now that she realized it, why not? After telling her his truth, he apologized. He never wanted to make her wait so long. Sepia was so emotional. Roxanne is her true Damien. And at the time of meeting who to reject, she truly loves. They both hugged. Overcome by the emotion of the moment, Sepia wanted to know the whole truth. What happened? Apparently, it all started with a ridiculous agreement between Emperor Burdick of the Huron Empire and Empress Yardiel of Ardiel, the Beast Empire. Many years ago, the Beast Empire became the largest of the Beast Empires. Emperor Verdict was very interested in ancient manuscripts of dark magic, but since it was in the ancient language of the beasts, he asked Empress Jardiel for something. Since Jardiel was in an unexpected position at that time, stable, given that a sacred beast, Roxanne, had already been born, she decided to listen to Verdict's proposal. Jardiel had to lend him the prince, the crown prince of the Beast Empire, and he would give her that book. Because Verdict wanted to conduct experiments to create a kind of weapon with which to use the beasts. And of course, the one he requested for this experiment was the Empress's son. In return, she could use that book which contains a spell that alters appearance. That's how Jardiel cast a magic spell on Roxanne to make him look like Demios, while Demios took his form. So the Empress sent Roxanne as her supposed son for them to experiment on. And now Sepia understood why he was full of scars. Although Roxanne continued. After several months of tests, the experiment finally failed. And from there, beings were born that were neither human nor beast, but creatures. Future bestialized beings, whom Verdict abandoned in the Beast Empire. Years later, when he returned, his appearance became more severe. His appearance returned to normal and the Empress immediately ordered him to the battlefield. At that moment, he lost all his memory. It probably happened because Jardiel cast a spell on him. He spent years on the battlefield and despite everything, managed to survive until 7 years. After returning, all his memories came back to him. And that was no coincidence. It happened because the sorcerer who cast that magic on him had died. Yes, Jardiel had already passed away. As soon as he remembered everything, he wanted to return to Sepia immediately, but at that time they were in the middle of a war. He couldn't abandon his subjects and flee alone. And of course, Sepia understood. She didn't judge him, she would have done the same. But 3 more years had already passed. And only after finishing the campaign could he return to her. That night he looked for her, finding her on a night walk through her garden. It was like seeing her for the first time, and he wanted to tell her everything, but he couldn't break the rule of not mentioning anything related to the Empress consort. Sepia, not knowing the truth, partly ignored Roxanne's heart, and understanding today all that he went through, she apologized. But Roxanne didn't blame her for anything, because she was the one who saved him. It was she who broke his last curse, as it wasn't he who told her, but she who remembered. So Sepia understood everything. The boy she loved was Roxanne, and Roxanne could only think of saying thank you. Because of her, he had escaped every curse, and today, remembering each other, they sealed their reunion with a kiss, by the sea that Sepia so longed to see. Meanwhile, Damien was very pleased in his palace. In his mind, he heard Sepia's pleas and was left speechless, begging him to get her out of that ghost palace. And today he laughed, finally Sepia will be his. Her eyes, her hair, her body. And at that moment, they came to inform his family that everything was ready. Damien went down to his basement, found his friend, with several animals they had captured for him. After killing them, slitting their throats, and bleeding them out, he calmed down and just remembered. He has a disease called madness. It's a feeling of ecstasy and satisfaction when ending the life of anyone, and when his mother discovered it for the first time, the only thing she could do was change his desire to hunt from humans to animals. Although the rumors still couldn't be controlled at that time. Over time, his mother had used dark magic to cure him. Her desire to cure him had become a great challenge. The desire to kill disappeared, but as a consequence, his mother fell very ill, and he didn't even feel guilt or compassion for this. His bloodlust was just gone. But not his evil nature. Over the months, the Euron Empire had offered him a scholarship to study in their empire, but his mother made Damien switch appearances with Roxanne. And that was satisfying, because he knew Roxanne would no longer have a place to return to, and while Roxanne was gone, Demios went to the land of Leopold, where because of his madness, he began to organize perfect scenes of animal murders. It was then that the rumor spread that Roxanne was possessed by a demon. 5 years later, Roxanne returned from the Orchestra Empire, and Damien returned to the Imperial Palace with his original face. However, after meeting with his father several times, he discovered that his father did not consider him worthy of becoming emperor. He knew of his brutality and bloodlust. Realizing that his father was now his enemy, Damien went to his mother. He found her very ill, and asked her to make him emperor as soon as possible. His mother agreed without hesitation. Days later, the emperor died, and Damien was crowned emperor. And despite having achieved such greatness, he felt dazed and bored. He couldn't do as he pleased. His obligations began to tie him to a desk, until one afternoon, a letter arrived from the Euron Empire. It was covered in tear stains. It told him how much she loved him, how much she missed him, and she asked him to save her. At first, he felt anger towards Sepia. She had indulged in a fantasy of love instead of dying in Huron, but soon he felt a desire for possession. If she was Roxanne's woman, then she definitely had to be his. And so, the day he saw her for the first time, seeing her smile for him, she made his black and white world fill with color. Since then, he only longed for her love, but now he knew she would never come to love him. It was all Roxanne's fault, and he planned to eliminate Roxanne. But then what? Would Sepia be as just like that? At that moment, his mind was cleared as he learned that his beautiful, kidnapped Duchess had disappeared. He knew the maid had gone to leave food for her, but she discovered no one was there. At this, Damien grabbed his sword. In front of the maid, he cut down the butler as fury consumed him. Seeing she was still alive, he told her to repeat it. who escaped. And so, Damien, in his madness, ended the servant's life. That was the beginning of the Emperor's true insanity. Thanks. As the days passed, Sepia was overjoyed in Leopold. She enjoyed the beautiful views and the attentive care of her servants, for Sepia was now known in the world of the gods. In the palace, she was known as Duke Roxanne's fiancée, and the one serving her as a lady-in-waiting was the beautiful Lucy. Since she hadn't been able to see Roxanne since her arrival, she asked about him. Shortly after, she went to the beach to see Roxanne. He had just become free, but he had already left. Sepia couldn't wait to see him. So she went to visit him for a moment, and they began a walk on the beach. Sepia walked barefoot on the sand for the first time. They saw 2 starfish. Roxanne picked one up for Sepia to see up close and placed it in her hands. The poor girl felt it was super weird, and then she felt the little star stick to her hand. Startled, she shook her hand, and the star went flying. The 2 of them ended up falling to the ground. Luckily, Roxanne protected her from getting hurt. They were left very close to each other. And Sepia asked if she was really his fiancée. Of course she was. But more than that, Sepia was his lifelong partner. Roxanne moved closer to her, and they were a hair's breadth away from kissing when Lucy suddenly appeared. Come. At that, Roxanne and Sepia shot up, but Lucy had interrupted them because Sepia had a visitor. Finally, Mrs. Lemedy had arrived in Leopold. After their lovely meeting, Sepia noticed she didn't look happy. And that was because Lemedy had been in the capital witnessing the terror. The Emperor's terrible madness. A few days ago, the disappearance of the former Empress was announced to everyone. But as more hours passed and she wasn't found, more palace servants died at the hands of the mad Emperor. Everyone in the palace was terrified. Damien kept demanding blood, and he got it. The citizens of the capital were desperate. An empire without its star of star was a candle, flickering in the wind. Meanwhile, that rat Titia had been going crazy. There were only 3 days left until her coronation as Empress, but her Damien simply wouldn't come to see her. Furthermore, the atmosphere in the empire was a disaster. And what was worse, her belly wouldn't stop growing, making her look ugly. So one of her maids arrived, bringing the tea she had requested. But since the rat Titia was going crazy, she felt nauseous upon seeing the tea and lashed out. She lashed out at the maid who had brought her tea. She grabbed a vase and ended up hitting her maid hard on the head with it. When the maid didn't respond, Titia got angry. She kicked her even harder, and as she did, the body fell to the floor. Titia had killed her. Seeing this, Titia panicked. She confirmed the maid was really dead and grew worried, because this could cause problems for her ascension. But then she had a brilliant and Machiavellian idea. A few hours later, her brother Galar Louv arrived. He came at the request of his sweet and saintly sister Titia. Of course, he had obeyed her and snuck out of the house without anyone noticing. Titia then mentioned that the Emperor wished to see him in secret. According to her, it was because of his incredible sword skills. So she led him to her room, and he naively entered. Once inside, he noticed everything was strange, and then he saw the lifeless body of the maid. He wanted to leave immediately, but Titia was ready for her act. She started screaming, "No, brother, no. Don't do this." And at her screams, the guards appeared immediately. Titia quickly gave her version of the story, blaming her naive brother for killing the maid. She lied that he had tried to kill her as well. For this crime, Galar was taken. He was brought to trial, and of course, he didn't know how to prove his innocence. Everyone supposedly already knew what he had done. The judge began by asking if he acknowledged the charges. And obviously, he denied them. His parents also defended him. However, the Emperor was on Titia's side and asked her to recount the events. Titia mentioned that during this time, she had been constantly threatened by the Count's family. Her so-called parents didn't understand what she was talking about, but the two-legged rat continued. She told everyone that from the beginning, they had asked her for jewels, ornaments, and that escalated to mansions, villas, and more. She had even kept a record of everything that happened. What her parents had received through her. Her parents, yes, were greedy, but Titia had given them things of her own free will. However, Titia added that her brother arrived that night making threats. He supposedly demanded she hand over the palace because he wanted to build a harem. He wanted to become the king of a nation. Faced with such nonsense, she claimed that when she refused, he tried to kill her. The maid intervened and died. With her tears, her story was more than believable. And unfortunately, there was nothing more to be done. For the crimes of the heir of the Lobra family, Damien sentenced the count and his wife to exile in the northern Renaju, and Galar Lobra would be condemned to death. But how I hate Damien. He kills servants as if they're worthless, but if someone else does it, he eliminates them without mercy. But just like that, this rat got rid of her problem. Her family, along with her own guilt. Her parents begged her for help, but Titia pushed them away and only said, "Goodbye, parasites." And so they were all taken away. Meanwhile, Titia was overjoyed. Damien trusted her blindly. A few days later, the day of the Empress's ascension ceremony arrived. Titia, without any objection, became the Empress of the Biastral Empire. What more could that white rat want? And after going from a flower seller to an Empress, she swore to protect this place, no matter the cost. Although she immediately went to fulfill her mission, since Blair had done so much for her, she had to fulfill her part of the deal. To get him the book that this dark magician so desired. So she went to the Empress's basement. She remembered Blair telling her that to get it, she just had to close her eyes and the book would appear. And just like that, it happened. Curious to know what was so special about the book, she was about to open it, but Blair appeared before her out of nowhere, preventing her from seeing the book. So, Titia quickly handed it over. Blair thanked her with a kiss on her forehead. She had now completed her mission as Empress. Now she just had to give birth without any problems. Only then would the mark be completely hers. From that day on, Titia enjoyed her life as Empress, but her assistants came to ask her to review some documents. But Titia couldn't care less. She wasn't planning on lifting a finger. But then, a maid came running, telling the Empress that a complaint had been filed. A moment ago, the brother of the maid Titia had killed came before the Emperor. He had filed a complaint. Above all, he wanted to discover the truth about his sister's death, because he knew she died simply following an order from the Empress. However, what really mattered to the beastly Emperor was something else. This man knew the Emperor wouldn't care about his sister, but he would care about information concerning the mark. So he told him everything, that apparently the Empress received a merchant named Blair. His visits were regular, every month. Damien didn't understand what that had to do with anything, but the man added that his sister once told him that this merchant was very strange and would stay alone with Titia. And he had even overheard her saying that the name on her chest was fake, although she planned to make it real somehow. Hearing this, Damien couldn't believe it and wanted to know if he had proof. The man swore to testify with his life on the line, but just then, Titia arrived at the audience, having overheard. She tried to silence the man, but Damien had already heard everything and had his doubts. However, she lashed out to keep him from saying more. And as he began to raise his voice, adding that he even knew how she humiliated and mistreated her servants, Damien became angry. He silenced them all and took a sword from one of the guards. He ended the man's life. Very simply. It was bloody and cruel. Titia was scared. Damien really was a murderer. But since he did it for her, she cared little. However, Damien asked Titia if it was true she saw that merchant every month. If she had exact dates for the visits, it must have been for some strange reason. So he declared, from now on, I issue an order of confinement for the Empress. No one will be allowed to speak with her for an entire month. In your face, Titia. I love happy endings. Days later, Sepia was dreaming. She was taking a little walk on the beach at night. Until suddenly, the high priest of the Marine Empire, the one who had allowed her divorce, appeared before her. He called her the Star of Star. Taking her hand, he asked her not to forget. The one she has chosen is the Emperor. Sepia didn't understand what he meant, but he had simply invaded her dream to tell her that, and then he disappeared. The next morning, Sepia woke up. She didn't understand what the high priest had told her. But then she remembered everything Lemedy had told her days ago. The Emperor had gone mad, and by the time she was in the capital, he had already killed more than 10 servants. She told her he was blinded by his desperation to find her. And Sepia knew that all of this was only because she is the Star of Star. Then, Lemedy told her that a strange rumor had surfaced, that the Empress's mark is fake. Thinking about all this now, Sepia knew that if the mark was fake, then everything was premeditated. And it was something Titia couldn't have done alone. So someone else must be behind it. She had even found out that Titia killed her brother and had her mother banished. Her adoptive parents. So she knew they weren't on her side. But then Sepia heard a noise, and an arrogant woman appeared before her, the famous Dylan Dardis, daughter of Raffican and Roxanne's cousin. Sepia noticed she was wearing the garments of a priestess. But this woman was already starting to scream at her like a madwoman. She had just realized that the dethroned Empress was her cousin's supposed fiancé. But now she introduced herself. She is Dylan, a saint of Leopold, daughter of the current temporary regent lord of Leopold. But Sepia didn't understand something. Why is she a saint? As far as she knew, there is only one saint in the empire of the beast humans. And that saint is her, the Star of Star. But this witch claimed things were different. Different in Leopold, because she had cured the epidemic that plagued Leopold. According to her, she used divine power, but Sepia knew she didn't. She knew it was impossible. Only the priests of the sea can use such power. She then recalled that her maternal uncle, the interim regent, had committed acts of corruption. And now she saw this woman boasting of being something she's not. Supposedly, she had come to meet her cousin's fiancé. Discovering that he's truly crazy, she asked if her intention in hiding in Leopold was a plot. Is it so the Emperor will reduce this place to ashes? The madwoman approached Sepia, demanding that she leave. She was a damn problem for Leopold. Sepia knew she was right, but then Roxanne arrived and he didn't understand why his cousin was being so shameless, yelling in his residence. But Dylan reproached him. Not only did he lock up her father, but now he's hiding the dethroned Empress. What is he doing? But Roxanne was tired of this girl. And of her father. Not only did they blame him for the epidemic outbreak, but now she comes here claiming to be a saint? She is not. Dylan tried to make him understand, but when she mentioned that he couldn't, that he was harboring a fugitive, Roxanne couldn't tolerate it anymore. First of all, Leopold belongs to him. And second, he made it clear to his cousin that Sepia is not a fugitive. He picked her up and added that she is his lover. This unhinged woman told him he was completely crazy and gave him 1 week if he didn't free her father from prison and take the former Empress back. In that time, she would have no choice but to tell the capital where Sepia is. And with that, she left. Sepia, of course, was worried. If they find out where she is, all of Leopold would be in danger. However, Roxanne knew his cousin wouldn't do anything. Not while the rumor of her father's corruption is circulating. It's said that in times of hardship, everyone asks for a savior, and his uncle played that role. 2 years ago, the plague had spread throughout Leopold. And that's when Dylan appeared out of nowhere, claiming to have received revelations from God. And when she touched people, she healed them completely. But behind all this, they extorted people with sacred donations. And those who donated more were the first to be cured. It was all so strange. The disease only caused red spots on the skin, then a high fever, and finally, difficulty breathing. And it was cured with just a touch from Dylan. That's why. He was investigating thoroughly, and now Sepia, knowing all this as a saint of the Empire, also planned to help him. She couldn't forgive a person who pretends to be a saint. Roxanne just thanked her. He had always admired her strength and sense of justice. And the closer he got to her, the more he wanted her. He told her how much he loved her. And now, with no one to ruin the moment, they finally kissed. Little by little, the kiss turned into something more. How? She who once abhorred this contact now treasured it. Each time, she wanted more and more, but she wanted to know something. Was this his first time? Roxanne assured her that everything he had done with her was a first time. But Sepia wondered then why he seemed so relaxed. And he wasn't relaxed at all. This beast was dying to devour her whole. It seemed that these two were finally going to give in to pleasure, but no. She wasn't mentally prepared for that. And Roxanne understood. Given the interruption, Sepia quickly asked him if Edwin was right that the Count and Countess Louvre were exiled to the north. Of course it was true. So, Sepia asked him for a favor if he could bring them to her. She knew she was no longer the Empress, but she couldn't ignore the fact that the Empire was falling apart because of her. And well, Roxanne would do anything for her. Days passed, and Sepia and Lucy were exploring the grounds. Apparently, this place had been created by Dylan Dardis. This was very curious, and Sepia asked Lucy if she ever had the plague. Lucy told her that yes, and that Dylan herself had treated her. She explained that first, Dylan gave her a tea, supposedly to reduce the pain. Then she put her hand on her forehead and cured her. Sepia, knowing there is only one saint in this world, and it is her, knew there must be something in that tea. Just then, in the middle of the garden, she saw some strange flowers. She asked Lucy if those flowers had always been there. Lucy hadn't seen them before, but she realized they were not native to Leopold. And smelling them, she remembered that she could sense the warmth. That same aroma on Miss Dylan when she was healing her. At this, Sepia picked one of the flowers and wanted to see the Duke immediately. Later, both Sepia and Roxanne were heading to the dungeons where he was being held. Rafikan Dardis, Dylene's father. Seeing Sepia, he wanted to know who she was, and Sepia obliged, quickly introducing herself as Sepia, the star of Ishtar and the Duke's current fiancée. Rafikan certainly knew who she was, but he got nervous when he saw that Sepia had in her hands that strange flower called lumna, native to the Uran Empire. A poisonous flower, but also with healing properties. He uselessly tried to deny knowing the flower. But Roxanne quickly clarified that he has witnesses to what he had done at the well. He had put petals of that flower in the most used water well by the residents of Leopold to poison them. And lumna poisoning can only be cured with the same plant. So they already knew Dylan used it to pass herself off as a saint. Now Roxanne's uncle was not only accused of embezzlement and corruption, but also of sickening everyone in Leopold. Rafikan, seeing he was caught, immediately started blaming Roxanne for everything. The late Empress had condemned Leopold to oblivion because of him. And for him, that was the only way to make money and move the territory forward. Besides, Roxanne had been sent to war and he had no alternative. So he blamed him for it. The late Empress knew nothing. Because Roxanne was born as a divine beast, so according to him, it was his fault. Deep down, Roxanne did feel guilty. But Sepia came to his defense, clarifying that no one is guilty of death just for being born. Besides, it was now clear that the plague had nothing to do with Roxanne. And Roxanne, seeing how she defended him, felt immensely happy. Elsewhere in the capital, in the Empress's bedroom, Titia was enjoying her luxurious life, locked in her room. And the poor girl was going crazy because she had already spent 15 days there. She remembered that day, amid the uncertainty of her deception with the mark, the Emperor had ordered her locked in her room for a month. Then she remembered she had to eat for the sake of her baby, although seeing that She had to eat in such a dirty and messy place. She felt just like how she used to live. Then she looked in the mirror and noticed that Damien's mark had become. It was fading from her chest. Now she was truly terrified. Soon they would discover that. The mark is fake, but she had hope. That Blair would save her. So she calmed down, put on makeup, and made herself beautiful, hoping the Emperor would soon come to visit her because she was now the most beautiful woman in the Empire. For sure. After getting pretty, she asked her little baby to grow up healthy, but losing her sanity, she regressed to a child. Looking crazed, she told it that they must do well and repay the favor of allowing it to be a parasite in her body. She looked in the mirror and saw she was very chubby. Then, uncovering her belly and seeing herself next to the woman in the mirror scared her. She saw a kind of monster coming out of her big belly. And of course, that's when she got terrified. The days passed, and finally in Leopold, the trial was held for the crimes of Raffican and his daughter. Today, Raffican confessed everything he had done before everyone. And of course, his daughter, who had believed her role as a saint, did not accept her reality. Her father made it clear she was never a saint. Although Dylan was another fool just like her father. She quickly mentioned that she never asked to be part of the Red King's family, that is, Roxanne's father. And again, she blamed her cousin, saying that because of him, they were hated by the late Empress. And she said that's why she was condemned from birth. But Sepia was tired of how they thought, blaming Roxanne for senseless things. She made it clear that their sins couldn't be justified just by blaming others. Rather, it was Roxanne who became a victim of the malice and immaturity of the late Empress. So she told Dylan that her priority should be to apologize to Roxanne and to all the people they harmed. This fool remained proud until the whole town started shouting at them, calling them scammers, and so they had no choice but to bow their heads, apologize to the people, and also ask Roxanne for forgiveness. However, that didn't spare them from punishment, as the two of them were exiled from the territory of Leopold. Apart from this, Roxanne took the opportunity to introduce, before all his people, Sepia. He introduced her as the Star of Ishtar, the one who will save the Swing Empire and the future Duchess of Leopold. So he presented his beloved fiancée. Several days passed. Roxanne had decided to take Sepia to his childhood room. It was a place Roxanne hadn't entered since the former Empress sent him to the Huron Empire. And this is where Damien worked his dark magic. Sepia, knowing it brought him bad memories, thanked him for showing it to her. But Roxanne was fine now. Then Sepia reminded him that everything had improved. That day, after Sepia was presented to everyone, she clarified the matter of the disease. She explained that the only way to cure it is to drink tea made from the same flour that made them sick for a few days. And that day they were even given a small bag with the flower petals for the tea. After that, the people understood that Roxanne never had anything to do with the plague. They apologized and in turn admired him because he had returned to bring them peace. So in just a few days, the plague disappeared almost completely, and for Roxanne, all of this was thanks to Sepia. But today, she was the one thanking Roxanne because he reminded her of something important, that she is the Star of Ishtar, and he even made her his future Duchess. However, for Roxanne, Sepia was more than all that. She is his reason for existence. She is everything to him. So they kissed, but they had to be interrupted. Roxanne was furious, but apparently they had visitors. The long-awaited Count and Countess Louvre had arrived. Once they were gathered, the Count asked Sepia for help, but she made it clear to them she is no longer the Empress and didn't call them to help or forgive them. However, if they cooperate with her, their lives will be a little better. So she wanted to know who introduced them to Titia. The Count, frightened, mentioned it was a man with a black snake in his eyes. They knew he was a reptile swin. He had asked them to adopt Titia, with the idea that it would bring them fame, money, and good connections. At first, they didn't believe him until he cast a spell before their eyes, which is why they had no choice but to believe him. The Countess then mentioned that everything is strange. She knew that the sorcerer and Titia's saw each other often. They even found out that Titia's mark was real, so it's possible that the baby he made isn't the Emperor's either, but after saying everything, they were removed from the room. And Roxanne now wanted to know what Sepia planned to do. And she needed to return to the capital and find that sorcerer, as she was not willing to allow any more innocent lives to be lost. She already knew they were capturing all the blonde, blue-eyed women in the capital, just to find her. All of this will stop if she returns. Then, Roxanne asked if she knew about Damien's fits of madness. She did, but she didn't understand how Roxanne knew. He said he had heard it once from his mother. Apparently, Damien is a defective divine beast. It made sense, because when he turned into a beast in front of Sepia, he looked terrifying, as if he were a monster. But today Roxanne showed her something. The seal of Drodian. It's what his father left in the palace and what he had been looking for. Sepia knew this was the relic of the Red King, and it's said to be the symbol of death and the Emperor's power, which is passed down from generation to generation, and, of course, it's something Damien never inherited. She then remembered it said the former Emperor didn't trust Damien, which is why he hid the Emperor's seal, which is now Damien's greatest weakness. Although today Sepia wondered why her greatest enemy had one of the seals. But it is said that no. Originally it was Emperor Balkan who wanted his son Roxanne to be the next emperor. But since he refused, his brother Gilithier took it. That's why both seals were in the possession of Gilaudier, Damien's father. However, he soon realized that there was no other. He realized his son was not fit to be emperor, so he gave the seals to his brother, Roximus. He had hidden them so Damien wouldn't find them. Of course, he hoped his son Roxanne would find them, though Sepia didn't understand. There's supposed to be only one owner of the seal. If it's not the Emperor or the Red King, then who? Roxanne told her that his father had suggested to his brother Gilitier that he create the position of Grand Duke and that the position of Queen should remain vacant until someone finds the seal. Therefore, when Roxanne found the seal, he had already become the Grand Duke. Consequently, Sepia, who is currently Grand Duchess in name only, has now become his wife, because Damien believed the title of Duke was still vacant, and that's why he named Sepia as his wife, as the wife of the Grand Duke. Although he never imagined he was marrying her to his enemy. But now there was something else they had to do. If he leaves a mark on her, could they make their marriage official? Sepia then remembered that the mark Roxanne speaks of is an ability only divine beasts possess, which consists of biting their partner's neck to publicly declare she belongs to him. And it's said they both will feel all kinds of sensations. And of course, Sepia wanted him to do it. So Roxanne bit her, and after he did, Sepia began to feel her body burn, with the desire to unite with her partner. However, they don't show us if that really happened. That night, as Sepia was getting ready, she thought about the night. She thought about Roxanne's mark, but more than that, she remembered their moment of passion. Then Roxanne arrived, and now they truly looked like a married couple. However, Roxanne wanted to show her something because apparently they have to see someone in the capital, and that someone is Viscountess Esquine. Several days passed. Emperor Damien was meeting with all his advisors. He learned from them that despite their search for the Grand Duchess, they hadn't found her. Inquired with her. Then he asked, which place did the Grand Duchess dedicate most of her charity efforts to? One of them informed him it was the Lebrun orphanage. And upon learning this, he declared his petition. All those children must die. Only then will the doubt disappear. So he ordered them to burn the building. One of the advisors asked him to reconsider, but for saying this, Damien was on the verge of killing him when they reported that they had found the Grand Duchess. The doors opened and Sepia appeared before Damien, though to his surprise, she wasn't alone. She was with her mother. and his archenemy, Roxanne. That truly infuriated him. He told Sepia to come with him, and only then would he forgive her for everything. But seeing her motionless, he was astonished. Even more so when he smelled a peculiar scent in the air, something that signifies it's not a scent of life. It meant that Roxanne and Sepia were now a real couple. Because he soon noticed that Sepia had Roxanne's mark on her neck. The fool asked if he had marked her. And driven mad, he started laughing at them. It seemed this lunatic was about to die from laughter, and then he added that actually he didn't care. Because he just has to kill him, and that's it. So the oaf Damien attacked Roxanne, but hold your horses. Because Roxanne wasn't going to let himself be killed. At that, Sepia, as the Grand Duchess, told them to stop. But Damien clarified that she possesses no authority, as there is currently no Grand Duke. And now he's in for a shock. When Sepia told him that that's not true. Someone has inherited the title of Grand Duke. Soon, Roxanne's assistant handed him the document from the former emperor that explained everything with every single detail. In that document, the emperor names Roxanne as Grand Duke, and Roxanne becomes Grand Duke. He added that from that moment on, he claims the territory of Leopold as a Grand Duchy, which means that under his authority, he can declare his territory an independent kingdom, even though it's within the empire. And therefore, Sepia has become the queen of that kingdom. And with that, she can defy the orders of any emperor. Damien could do nothing, but he couldn't afford to allow Sepia to go to Leopold, because if he wanted to bring her back later, he would have to start a war against the Grand Duchy. Because of that, Damien begged her not to leave, and she made it clear she had no intention of leaving. She planned to stay in the capital, but not with this jerk. She would stay in the Grand Duke's palace with her husband, just to make it hurt. The fool married her to his enemy all by himself. But this idiot had a plan in mind, and for it to work, he had to be docile for now. Only then could he trap her. Besides, he had to plan how to get rid of that horrible beast. So he left them alone. A little later, Sepia and Roxanne went to the Grand Duke's palace. There they met with Viscountess Swinny, who, in the letter she had sent to Sepia, asked to speak with her to tell her about the Emperor's great secret. So today they sat in the salon and Sepia wanted to know the reason for her letter. And Gwyneth, without hesitation, asked if they knew why the Emperor has fits of madness. Sepia didn't know, but Swinny did. So she told them that these attacks are due to a birth defect, and it seemed to coincide with what Roxanne said. He mentioned hearing it from his mother, but Swinny knew the whole truth. The current emperor, Damien Barodrodian, is actually an illegitimate son of the late emperor. Sepia didn't understand how, since the imperial family is supposed to always make an imprinting pact. That pact is made before the goddess Drodian, in which the emperor and empress unite their souls for the rest of their lives, and so we're told. The late emperor had a consort named Charlotte. In front of others, Charlotte was in her animal form, as a white fox. However, when alone, she took her human form, and one day, the emperor made a suggestion to Swinny. At that time, the empress had lost her baby, and unable to accept that fact, she continued to believe she was still pregnant. At the same time, Charlotte became pregnant, so the emperor asked that they pass off Charlotte's child as the empress's son. Gwyn, who loved the late empress very much, seeing her suffer, accepted the emperor's request. And soon, when Jordiel held in her arms the son she so desired, she improved rapidly. She thought everything would be fine, but the emperor didn't know. He was unable to comprehend the will of the goddess Drodian. Roxanne knew he meant that wolves can only have one partner for life, and if they break that rule, they will suffer the goddess's wrath. And the one who suffered the consequences of this was Damien. Sepia asked if Damien knows. Yes, because he himself had killed his mother, Charlotte. Sepia couldn't believe it. Why would he do that? To Swinny, it was logical. By eliminating her, he also eliminated all existing proof that he is a child. And now she explained that this is the reason why she rejected the emperor. As the star of Ishtar, she must have felt an instinctive aversion to the emperor's curse. But beyond that, Swinny promised to help them if their wish is to dethrone the emperor. Sepia knew why. It was Damien who manipulated her mother by taking advantage of her friendship with Swinny, all to use black magic and become emperor. Swinny told them that the mark on Titia is said to be fake. And she believed she knew who created that mark. Meanwhile, the emperor kept hearing in his mind, "Kill him! Kill him!" He planned everything from the beginning. He even marked Sepia and his beloved. That voice reminded him that night after night. His Sepia is in the arms of that beast. Damien no longer wanted to hear that voice. He begged it to be quiet. But it repeated that only if he kills him will Sepia return to his side. And Damien, without losing his sanity, asked, "And what would happen to Sepia's heart?" "She will continue to love that damned beast." And just like magic, something appeared on his arm, Sepia's mark, and this one was real. With this, he now went crazy, because this should have been impossible. He went to Titia's room, broke the chains, and upon entering, everything was a mess. There was even a nauseating smell. And deep inside was Titia just as mad, if not more so, than him. Titia ran to see Damien, though she ended up falling on the way. However, even on the floor, she asked if everything had been cleared up. She had waited for him anxiously, but he wanted to see the mark. In desperation, he struggled to see it, realizing that since it was about to disappear, it was a fake mark. Now Damien knew. Her mark is fake. His own is real, and he was ecstatic about it. But well, Titia had now lost everything. She clung to him as best she could, telling him she did it all for love. But Damien was furious with her. He didn't understand how she dared to deceive him. And now, without mercy, he grabbed the madwoman, Titia, by the hair and dragged her to the window. Damien was so angry he was capable of throwing her from there. And now Titia begged him to forgive her. Then she told him that if he won't do it for her, to do it for his son, that she carries in her womb. With this, Damien forgave her, but not completely, as he ordered this woman to be locked up alone in the West Tower. After that, happy and mad, Damien ordered the Empress's palace to be restored, because the Star of Ishtar will return to her rightful place. But I doubt it. The days passed, and the people learned that the Empress was going to be stripped of her title after giving birth, because her mark was fake. Meanwhile, Sepia thought about how fortunate she was to arrive in the capital in time, as she learned that madman wanted to burn down an orphanage. Although now there was another development. Damien discarded Titia without hesitation. On the other hand, she was happy. At that moment, she and Roxanne were even working in the same office. So Sepia was more than happy to be near him. Besides, ever since he marked her, it's as if she can feel what Roxanne feels. And in the midst of her thoughts, Roxanne appeared out of nowhere beside her. He kissed her and wanted to know if something was wrong. Sepia just mentioned that she feels as if her body is on fire. And for Roxanne, it was normal that, after being marked, she as a human would feel things that she didn't feel before. Well, the thing is, Sepia was waiting for something to happen. Something that hadn't happened before. That day, after being marked, Roxanne stopped before things got exciting. And since then she has wondered why he stopped so suddenly. Now she was worried because since that day, Roxanne had been distant. But she thought maybe it was just her perception, and because of that, she preferred not to touch on that topic for now. Besides, she wanted to ask him something. The missing Drodian seal is the Empress's, right? And it was. He had found the Emperor's. And according to the map, the other seal should be in the Grand Duke's palace, that is, right where they were. But no matter how much he has searched, he hasn't found it. So there was a possibility that it had been found. That someone found it before and hid it somewhere else, or they still haven't found the exact spot. Then, Sepia thought that maybe to find it, one must think from a female perspective. Because women tend to be more cunning, like Titia who deceived Damien. Thanks to the sorcerer. And remembering the sorcerer, she also remembered her conversation with Swinny. She had mentioned that she thinks she knows who he is. Who the sorcerer is. She told them that the black magic book Jardiel had was the one given to her by the Orion Empire in the exchange. But it was incomplete, and although she couldn't find the other part, she did discover something. It is said there was a family in the Swing Empire that was exterminated. For the Emperor, black magic was an evil force, so he annihilated the only family that kept and studied black magic books. And the one who must have the other part of the black magic book must be the sole survivor of that massacre. So, he was definitely the culprit. Furthermore, she told them that Empress Yurdiel launched an attack on the city of Yurdiel. She cast a spell on the book so that she would be the only one able to read it. However, her spell consisted of the book recognizing its master, which could be anyone with the title of Empress. So after her death, upon her passing, the book's master became Sepia. She was unaware of this. But the sorcerer surely found out. Since he couldn't convince Sepia to give him the book, he probably did everything to create a new empress. So he used Titia to get her to give him the book. So it was certain that he had already obtained the book and now has the complete version. Just then, Roxanne woke her from her memories, and Sepia quickly said it was time to rest. She asked him to come with her, but Roxanne, as if pulling away, told her to go alone, that he still had work to do. Sepia was now sure. Roxanne was trying to avoid her. Sepia was about to ask him, but out of nowhere, Roxanne told her he would have to leave for a week. Sepia wanted to know why. But Roxanne told her it was a personal matter. Sepia didn't understand. They were supposed to be a couple now. But Roxanne promised to tell her everything when he returned. Although Sepia wanted to talk about it now. However, they were innocently interrupted again with the announcement that the Emperor has arrived to see them. Sepia looked out the window and saw a crazy scene. Emperor Damien was outside, waiting for her with a bouquet of flowers. Sepia was bewildered. And so was Roxanne, but they still had to go. They went to receive the Emperor. He immediately approached Sepia, telling her, "Dear Star of Ishtar, I, Emperor Damien, have come to propose marriage." Roxanne didn't hesitate to jump at his throat and told him that won't be possible. She is his wife and the Grand Duchess. But unfortunately, Damien had an ace up his sleeve. Literally, he had something up his sleeve, Sepia's mark, and he was more than delighted. "You know about that mark?" Sepia couldn't believe it, but she reminded him. He was the one who dethroned her. And Damien knew that, but he also knew that she always wanted to be the Empress. That's why he wanted to know if she wasn't attracted to him, now that he has her name engraved on his body. Sepia quickly said no and that she never will. They then left, and Damien was now truly suffering. After they left, Roxanne noticed that Sepia was upset, especially with how coldly she asked why he was leaving for a week. Even after what happened with Damien. And the worst part is he's leaving without telling her the reason. A stunned Roxanne didn't know how to explain. He hugged her and clung to her as if he were suffering in that moment. Sepia quickly noticed he was burning with fever. She wanted to take him to rest, but Roxanne clarified that it wasn't. It wasn't a fever, but that the liberation period had arrived. And that's why he was trying to get away from her. He didn't want to hurt her. Sepia knew a little about this. It's a period in which the Swin must release their animal forms, and they usually do it with their partner. And of course, she wanted to know why he wouldn't do it with her. Was it because she is human? And it wasn't that. It's because divine beasts are a little different from normal Swin. A divine beast's liberation period means it enters another state. And he was barely resisting it. Besides, he didn't want to harm her, but Sepia felt the same heat he did. And today she asked Roxanne to leave his mark on her, as she didn't care if he hurt her. So, together they went to the room. They started kissing, and in the middle of it, Roxanne asked if she really thought he would leave after what happened with Damien. She couldn't imagine how he felt. The only thing on his mind was the need for him to leave. A need for Sepia to mark him, to show that he is hers. But of course, she is human, not a beast, and yet she agreed and bit him with all the pent-up desire she had for him. So good, you bastard. After that, there was no time to think, and between an I love you from Roxanne, they spent a pleasant night, and not just one. A week passed, and Sepia woke up in the arms of her beast. Touching him, she noticed he was no longer hot, so his liberation period must have ended. She then remembered. She remembered that for a whole week, they both surrendered to pleasure and, being marked by him, she felt everything he felt for her. Until finally, on the last day, she saw Roxanne transform into a gigantic divine beast. And so, she slept on his warm fur. And today, after everything she had experienced with him, while he slept, she expressed how much she loved him. But then, as she touched him, something strange happened. Her hand began to glow in a strange way, and instantly, the Empress's Drodian seal appeared in her hand. This was what Roxanne had been searching for a long time, but she didn't understand why it suddenly appeared in her hand. And suddenly, magic enveloped her. In the garden of the Leopold Palace. She didn't understand what she was doing there. It was as if she were a ghost. Then she saw a magic circle on the ground, and on it were Roxanne's parents. They looked very young. But then, she saw a whole magical process over the female Drodian seal. After the magical ritual ended, Roximus mentioned that only the one who is the successor's partner will be able to find this seal. And looking at Sepia, he said, "Take good care of it, Star of Ishtar." After that, she was back in the room. She could barely understand that the seal appeared because she had become the partner of the true successor to the throne. But then, a commotion startled her. Even more so when the knights entered, bursting into the room, saying that the Grand Dukes were being arrested for treason. This made no sense. But then Roxanne appeared in his beast form. And now with both Drodian seals, he was the true emperor. Sepia knew that the Swin, being human animals, are governed by the laws of nature, so they all obey the strongest. And at this moment, Roxanne has absolute power, for he is the original emperor. How do you like them apples? Meanwhile, the crazy Damien was thinking about why Sepia, even though he has her mark, doesn't love him. But then appeared Blair. Damien already knew him and reminded him. He promised that if he let Titia live, he would give him Sepia. And of course, he planned to keep that promise. Blair then suggested to the emperor that he cut off the Black Wolf's limbs, but for that, he must isolate him. He could release the barbarians in the capital and then, when the victims start appearing, all he has to do is point to the Grand Dukes as the culprits. He can even add that the Grand Duke, who released the barbarians, did so with the intention of eliminating all the Swin and creating an empire of barbarians. Thus, he will be sentenced to death. But Sepia will want to live and will throw herself into his arms. For this fool, it was a fantastic idea, but he was merely a pawn of Blair because he planned to get rid of the Emperor and the Star of Ishtar once and for all. A few days passed, and due to what happened, the Grand Duke's residence was guarded, keeping the Dukes under house arrest. But at least thanks to Roxanne, Sepia wasn't taken to prison. Just then, the butler arrived to inform Sepia that barbarians were ravaging the capital. Sepia, who was aware, knew it was said that Roxanne was behind all this, and she knew the origin of that rumor was Damien, but she couldn't say it. He couldn't have done it alone. The sorcerer must be behind him. And thinking of him, she remembered that Titia is trapped in the West Tower. She wanted to see her to find out more about the sorcerer. But then her butler interrupted her thoughts, telling her that Etensel Crudel had arrived. That handsome young man who had tried to hit on her before. The little man who was a fox. Upon meeting him, Etensel quickly noticed that Sepia was impregnated with Roxanne's scent, and he knew she must have spent the liberation period with him. But anyway, Sepia wanted to know the reason for his visit. Etensel, without beating around the bush, mentioned that just as she helped him before, He wanted to be of help to her now. Since he had spent so much time as an animal, he developed special abilities, eyes that can read another person's body. For example, he could see that the Emperor is closer to being a monster than a divine beast, and, of course, Sepia saw it too. But what caught Sepia's attention the most was when a tense told her he can see at a glance what someone is hiding, and behind Sepia is a line that connects her to the High Priest. This is normal, as she is the star of Ishtar, and her bond with the High Priest, who has no physical body, is due to the blessing she received from God. And as you know, the High Priest only manifests through mirrors and water. Perhaps she can do the same. Sepia thanked Denzel very much for his help. And after their talk, she quickly went to a mirror. She wanted to check for herself, remembering her dream when she was in Leopold. Perhaps seeing the High Priest in the hall, she had realized he was a man. In her dreams it was because of her bond. And if so, then what he told her, the High Priest, is true. She must never forget that the one she chose is the Emperor, the true Emperor. Then, upon touching the mirror, it felt liquid, and now she confirmed it was true. So, after closing her eyes, she asked it to take her where she wished to go. She moved closer to the mirror, and in a blink, she was with a man. In the West Tower of the country. Royal Palace, right where Titia was imprisoned. And the worst part is that poor Titia was at the end of her pregnancy. At term. Sepia tried to cross, but the mirror that was in that place was cracked, and upon touching it, she ended up cutting her hand. Meanwhile, poor Titia was lamenting how things had ended, though soon Blair arrived. Titia saw salvation in him, but he hadn't come to rescue or get her out. Rather, he had used her. But of course, he kept his word. He made her Empress, but never promised she would remain in that position. Besides, it was her fault for ending up this way. Etienne was frustrated. She had even gotten pregnant by the Emperor. She begged for his help, and then, after her water broke, the baby was about to arrive. She started having very strong contractions, a sound that was melody to Blair, who stayed with Titia, waiting patiently for the moment of the birth of that little boy. After giving birth, Titia wanted to see her baby, but Blair, who was holding him, wouldn't give him to her. Instead, he told her that what she had created is very valuable to him because he had placed a spell in her womb with the blood of the divine beast lineage together. With the blood of a black snake, a spell that combines all the characteristics of the beasts into a single body. That is, Titia gave birth to a baby monster. And despite everything, she begged him to return her baby. But soon her pleas were silenced as she fell unconscious. Then Blair heard a noise, and turning to see the red mirror in that room, he realized she was there. It was Sepia. He greeted her, calling her Star of Ishtar, and immediately crossed into her dimension, breaking the mirror. Standing before her, he began to tell her that the name of the Swin, given to the beast men, is a name that carries all the hatred and love of a goddess. In reality, being a beast was their punishment, as a beast is destined to live. As such, that is the law of nature. But that goddess was born half-beast. She became a monster. Among beasts, but among men she was a goddess. Unable to bear the loneliness, she had a son with a man, and thus the beast men were born. Without a doubt, today he wanted Sepia to understand something. His desire is to return everything to normal. A world where beasts and men are separate, like in the old days. And guess what? That baby will be the sacrifice to achieve it. Because only the creation of something that should never have existed is what can restore the laws that were broken long ago. And so after saying goodbye, he told her to await the birth of a new world. Sepia tried to stop him, but she was quickly expelled from that dimension. For a moment, she thought everything she saw and heard was a dream, but seeing her wounded hand, she knew it was real. Then she saw Roxanne, and could finally tell him the sorcerer's goal, to exterminate the Swin. Elsewhere, Damien was with the Council of Nobles. They mentioned that Damien was a man of his word, that it is unlikely the Grand Duke is committing treason, but he was soon silenced by someone who told him to keep quiet before he lost his head. Luckily, because Damien soon started shouting, telling everyone to leave immediately as he was losing his sanity. He called out Sepia's name and something in him changed. His madness took over, and after letting his animal side out, he swore to go after her. At the same time, Sepia and she was showing Roxanne the imperial seal of the Empress, the one she obtained after touching her man. She also told him about that vivid vision, and they immediately fused the seals. He was happy because the key to everything had always been her. And now that the Drodian seal was complete, they could use it to obtain absolute power. But there was a problem. The only ones who can use the seal are the emperors. They are not recognized as such. Even the mere fact of having the seal makes them look like traitors. But Sepia was only thinking about the well-being of her family, of all the inhabitants of the empire who were suffering because of Damien. And Roxanne knew of her worry, so he asked Sepia to calm down. He will take care of everything. Sepia kissed him because she loved that he knew exactly what she was thinking. However, she's not going to leave him alone. Together they will. They will win for the good of all. That night, while Sepia was sleeping alone, she felt a gentle pressure on her. She couldn't breathe, and when she opened her eyes, she was terrified. Damien in his beastly form was on top of her, with a demonic aura, and he had come to finally have what was supposed to be as long ago. Olenarla, he told her she is so sweet and that he had waited so long for this. And turning into a great power, human, he clarified that the time had come for her to be his. Sepia tried to stop him, to make it clear that doing this wouldn't change anything. But this fool didn't care about any of that, because at least he would get her body. Sepia was scared. And although she threatened to scream, he told her to do it. Anyway, no one would hear her. Sepia knew he got there with the help of the sorcerer. And when he was about to defile her body, Sepia made it clear that she always thought that she couldn't hate him more, but guess what? She was wrong. She hates him beyond imagination. He told her not to provoke him, but Sepia said she didn't care, that he is worthless to her. And at that, Damien began to choke her, telling her to die. Sepia preferred this to being touched by him, though soon her salvation arrived. Roxanne in his beast form entered through the window. Quickly, he mercilessly attacked Damien, reached him, bit him, and left him unconscious for seconds. He licked his lover to remove all traces of Damien. Sepia was finally safe, but soon Damien got up. And Sepia, who was left with nothing. Does he know how much it hurts to be rejected by her? Today she made it clear she will never be his. Damien didn't understand. He loves her. He did all this for her. But Sepia knew that what he seeks is not love. And she would rather die than be the property of a monster like him. And it broke what was left of his sanity. And knowing he wouldn't win, Damien escaped. In that moment, Sepia looked out the window and everyone was gone. The capital was engulfed in flames. The barbarians were attacking the city, and they knew that the barbarians were attacking the city. It is the work of that sorcerer. Sepia asked Roxanne to help her stop him, and he was willing to do anything for her. So, after changing, she knew it was time for his son to die. She mounted Roxanne in his beast mode and together, they went to end this absurd war. Meanwhile, the people of the city were terrified. There was fire everywhere, and the worst part was that those beasts were killing anyone who crossed their path. Sepia didn't hesitate, and they went to stop them. And after returning to his human state, Roxanne asked the captain to activate the capital's barrier to stop the barbarians from entering. The captain hesitated a bit, as the only one who can give that order is the emperor, and obeying Roxanne would only bring him trouble. It would mean betraying the crown. But Roxanne asked him to do it, and that he would be the one to bear all the consequences. And of course, the captain didn't want any more losses. So he accepted his word without hesitation. After that, Sepia asked Roxanne to accompany her to another place, and it was the underground temple, as she was sure the sorcerer was there. Because that's where the misfortunes began, as black magic and bad fortune work in a similar way. And it's also the best way to spread black magic through the Empire's waterways. Upon entering the temple, Roxanne quickly felt the presence of evil protection, and at that moment, snakes began to attack him suddenly. Although he eliminated them without a problem, he ended up bitten by some. Sepia was worried about him, but Roxanne swore that he was immune to that amount of poison, and so they continued. Soon they noticed the water was contaminated. And deep inside was Blair with Titia's baby. He welcomed them as he was expecting them. Sepia couldn't believe he was sacrificing so many innocents, but for Blair, it wasn't like that. The only thing he's trying to do is return everything to its natural order, and he explained that nature is simple, it only takes what it needs, be it one life or two, if it's for the greater good. And for him, the world of beasts is magnificent. But since the beasts transformed into men, everything is unbalanced and hangs by a thread. Sepia tried to explain that if that changed, it's because humans were at a disadvantage. But for Blair, humans are an unnecessary evil, though for Sepia, it's not like that. Because it's humans who can help the weakest, as no ideology can be above life. But Blair, smiling, told her that soon everything will be in perfect balance, and he will end up at the top of the food chain. The fool wanted to be the only beast and human, and lead both worlds. Sepia now understood. She asked Roxanne to attack him, but she soon noticed that Roxanne was not well. The venom of the snakes that bit him was slowly killing him. Suddenly, after asking Sepia for forgiveness, Roxanne fainted. Blair was so happy because everything was going as he expected. Immediately, Blair activated his black energy field, and even the book of black magic spells was in the place. He told Sepia that the ritual to turn the Swin into beasts requires 2 sacrifices. The first, that baby, a young soul of mixed blood, of a divine beast and the black snake. And the other will be her, when she experiences the great pain of having lost what she loves most. She will voluntarily invoke the brightest star in the sky, and he will snatch it from her. So, when Roxanne dies, he will have achieved everything. Hearing this, Sepia closed her eyes and held out her hand. She remembered the high priest's words. She must not forget that the one she chose is the emperor. Using the great power of the high priest's blessing, she opened her eyes and told Roxanne that he is the true emperor. She held him, and the blessing of the Star of Shtar activated. Sepia had invoked the brightest star in the sky to heal Roxanne. Blair was completely stunned, as if wondering what had happened. In essence, the power of the Star of Ishtar is to change destiny, and to do so, one must invoke the brightest star in the sky. Thus, she managed to heal Roxanne, and Roxanne didn't understand what was happening. He felt as light as if he had been washed. Sepia couldn't believe she had such power and never knew how to handle it, but at least she managed to save him. Blair, on the other hand, was frustrated. But it didn't matter. Now he just had to work a little harder. He drew his sword and attacked Roxanne. But Roxanne, a formidable warrior, managed to block him and push Blair's sword away. And he ran him through with his sword. And they thought they had finally defeated him. But no. Blair, smiling, told them that through his veins runs not blood, but poison. Besides, this body is just an empty shell. In short, Blair was an immortal being. But then Sepia remembered. At this moment, this temple is his domain. But if she returns it to its original state, they will weaken him. So Sepia planned to use the power of the high priest and purify everything. She asked Roxanne to break the crystal ceiling. And he did it without hesitation. He did it. Meanwhile, Sepia prayed for the high priest to grant her the power to defeat the darkness. And soon, every crystal that fell on her transformed into divine power. Blair was truly scared then. As it was purified, he left. To verify everything, the trace of black magic was disappearing. Blair began to beg Sepia to stop. She was ruining everything. But for Sepia, it was his horrible beliefs that were ruining the world. And after finishing the purification, the temple returned to its original state, and in the midst of all this, only one black snake remained, and the black serpent was left lifeless, being the only one that survived the divine power. Sepia yelled at Roxanne to destroy it. Those snakes are Blair's heart. And now, after finishing off that snake, it was over. They finished off Blair, who still, it seems, has blood in that little body. Blair cursed them. He couldn't believe he was defeated. And since he lost the temple, what he had made his own was crumbling. Sepia and Roxanne had to get out as fast as possible. Quickly from there, but Sepia didn't want to leave. Without that baby who was not to blame for Blair's ambitions and those of his parents. Then Blair, before dying, blamed her for preventing the rebirth of a pure world. But no matter how much Sepia explained to this fool that what he did was not right, he clung to life, to his idea that his ideal world was the best for the world. However, Sepia, after picking up the child, made it clear to Blair he was nothing more than a simple coward. And Blair died. Without admitting it, he was a man who didn't leave. So Roxanne, Sepia, and the son of, they left the temple, while Blair, due to his curse, disappeared, leaving only a trail of blood. After leaving that place, they saw it was raining, calming the fire that ravaged the empire. However, now uncertainty remained. What will happen with the tax on impunity? And with this child? Roxanne, who knows her too well, asked her not to worry about anything. He hugged her, but soon Damien appeared. He had returned to his normality. Well, as a human, because he was still half crazy. Quickly, he asked Roxanne why he came out of that temple, if it is sacred, a place where only the emperor and his consort can enter. But for Roxanne, an emperor who had 2 wives cannot question him. Damien immediately got angry, but seeing Sepia, he wondered what she was carrying in her arms. Sepia showed it to him and said, "This is your son and Titia's." Seeing him, he said that monster cannot be his son. He told her to get rid of him, but soon he realized he had spoken informally and demanded to be respected as the emperor he is. But then he asked Sepia to get rid of that child and have a child with him. Oh no! Kill him! Heh! But well, there was no trace of that. Handsome emperor left. Now, he was just an unhinged man, and Sepia knew it was time to put everything in its place. She took out the complete Drodian seal and, holding it, she used her power as the Star of Ishtar, stripping Damien of his throne today. Immediately, the Drodian seal began to shine and soon Damien began to suffer the consequences. He wanted to say no, that he is the emperor, but he couldn't say it. Desperate, he began to shout at Sepia, "Wait, look, I have your name engraved on my body," and he asked her to remember the years they lived as a couple. But then he started spitting blood. And that wasn't something Sepia did, but a lunatic. Damien was pierced by a sword right in the chest. And he died. But the one who did it was Titia, who after laughing like a madwoman, reminded Damien that he once told her that she would be the only one in his life. But he shouldn't worry today because she won't go to that hell alone. She will take him with her. And so, after kissing him, she took the sword and after telling him how much Titia didn't let anyone see her stop her. Quickly, she pierced herself with the sword and died too. In an incredible way, Sepia and Roxanne no longer had to fight anyone else. Everyone who was destroying the empire was dying one by one. Although it was shocking for Sepia to see this. Roxanne hugged and calmed her. However, that poor baby was now an orphan, carrying sins that were not his to bear. 2 weeks passed and Sepia worked for 10 days, day and night to stabilize everything, but many Swin had died due to the black magic. And now there was much to be done. Then Roxanne visited her, as the time had come to put everything in order. And so, with Titia's baby, they went to the house. They stood in front of a mirror. 2 weeks ago, after the deaths of Damien and Titia, Roxanne asked Sepia what she plans to do with the baby. Sepia had thought about it a lot and wanted to send him to another place. That baby had a pure soul, but it wasn't natural for this world. That's why she thought of sending him to the purest place. There is a place where greed doesn't exist. And so today, after calling the high priest, he was happy. They had made the best decision for that child. To send him to a place where he will be purified and where he can have the immediate life of innocence he deserves. The famous stellar priest saw that magnificent creature and told them that the ocean was a great ocean. It is formed by thousands of layers. There, everything necessary will be purified in him, and he will be reborn as the son of the goddess. Sepia knew there is nothing wrong with that baby, but she couldn't allow him to keep paying for his parents' sin. And so, the high priest took the baby and thanked Sepia, the star of Ishtar, because she had changed everyone's destiny. Besides, the goddess of this world doesn't usually meddle in these matters, but he was sure she is pleased with Sepia. And so, the high priest took that beautiful baby away. After he left, Sepia and Roxanne were happy, but Sepia still wanted her wish to come true, for Roxanne to become her emperor. Roxanne didn't answer. He just picked her up in his arms and carried her to the throne. After seating her on the throne, he knelt before her, telling her that if it is her will, he will become the emperor. However, his only empress, the goddess and the pillar of his heart for all eternity will only be her, his Sepia. He then kissed her hand, making a vow of loyalty, a vow to have only one partner in his entire life. And from today, Roxanne would only take orders from the woman. From her and what did Sepia ask for? Well, a kiss, one of those that take your breath away. The days passed and the funeral was held in honor of Emperor Damien. But instead of people mourning, there were only people angry with Damien. Besides, Titia had also died under her title of Empress, as the procedures to depose her had not been completed. That's why no one asked what happened to her baby. For the entire kingdom, their deaths were the best thing for the empire since they never cared about anyone's well-being. A few days later, the wonderful day arrived to present the new emperor to everyone. The ceremony was held welcoming the Grand Duke and the Grand Duchess, two people who deserved to hold the position of emperors. So they presented themselves before the high priest, who today happily named Roxanne Claude Leopold as the happiest of people, as Emperor Roxanne Claude Drodian. And since Roxanne was married to Sepia, the high priest named Sepia Leopoldina as Sepia Ishtar Drodian, Empress of the Suez Empire. And now, the whole world celebrated the new beginning, a time of prosperity for all. That night, after the coronation ceremony, Sepia once again had Betty and Mrs. Lemedy with her, who were happy to be able to return to their home and call her Empress again. Sepia, despite all this, was nervous, as today was her first night with Roxanne as emperors of the Swin Empire. But she shouldn't have been. She was where she always should have been, with the person she loves. Shortly after, when they were alone, her handsome man, Roxanne, arrived. He didn't hesitate to kiss her and show her what he feels for her. And he wasn't the only fool in love. She made it clear to him today that he is her property, and she is also his. I know. Clothes off. And let's get to it, because today they had to seal their union as emperors. For fabulous years passed, and they were finally seeing the fruits of all this time working for the empire. Everyone lived in peace, begging for eternity for the father and mother of this empire. And Sepia was happy. However, today she experienced something she thought would never happen to her. Suddenly, her favorite tea, coffee, became repulsive. She couldn't imagine what was happening to her. She thought she was getting sick. and she tried the tea again. But this time she was really surprised when she almost ended up vomiting. And of course, Betty and Lemony knew what was happening. They took her to be checked by the doctor, and as expected, he gave her the great news. She was carrying the fruit of their love in her womb. Yes, she's pregnant. Sepia was so amazed. Even though Lemony repeated over and over that she was going to be a mother, Sepia couldn't believe it because for years had already passed, and in all that time she hadn't been able to get pregnant. She thought Damien's words were true, and that she couldn't have children, but today everything had changed. Her dream had come true. And Roxanne, who had heard the good news that night, came running, even stumbling. They spent the whole day trying to process the news. It still felt like a dream, and if it was, they didn't want to wake up. Roxanne still didn't know if he would be a good father, but Sepia clarified. She knows his heart, knows what he suffered, and yet he is a spectacular being. So he will be an excellent father. She asked that they promise together to take care of their people and now their baby. But Roxanne clarified, now more than ever, he will also take care of her with all his being. For Sepia, it was thrilling. Always, despite the circumstances, she was something precious to him. So she had to reciprocate the same love he gives her. She kissed him and knew that in the future, there would only be good things for them both. And between I love you and I love you, we reached the end. And they lived happily ever after. And so we conclude, family.